City of Northglenn, Channel 8, keeping you informed of events in your community.
Good evening and welcome to our March 19th study session. Joanna, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Dodge.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Escobar.
Here.
Councilmember Sowers will be absent. Councilmember Leidy. Here. Councilmember Downing will be absent. Councilmember Brown. Here. Councilmember Whitman. Here. Councilmember Duran-Molica. Here. Councilmember Wilford. Here.
All right. Well, we have a pretty robust agenda, so we'll get right into the first presentation, which is the HEAL Committee, or HEAL Update. Hi, Becky.
Thank you, Mary Dodge, council members. Becky Smith, Planning Manager and Planning and Development here with Ashley Cotty, Senior Planner, to present a brief update to the council on what the HEAL Committee's been doing in 2017, as well as some background for some of our new members, and then what the committee is looking at for this year and sort of beyond, and to get any feedback that you guys have, of course. So just for a little bit of background, the city joined the Live Well Colorado Heal Cities and Towns campaign in 2014 by passing a resolution, and that resolution said that we were going to focus on improving access to healthy food in our community, focusing on how we can create an active environment, as well as looking at healthy workplace. As a result of that resolution, we formed a committee in 2015 that just focuses on those aspects of health, and then has also added social health to things that we're looking at, because they do want to foster that stewardship in the community. And in 2017, some of you may remember, we did achieve elite status, which is the highest status that you can get in the Live Well Cities and Towns campaign, which we achieved by passing a policy in each area of the campaign, as well as 2 additional policies that address health in the built environment. Our committee is made up of both residents of the community as well as staff representatives. With the staff representatives, we've really tried to focus on departments that have an influence on the built environment, as well as departments that engage a lot with the community, so that we can really focus on that education to the community, as well as work through policies that do have an impact on our built environment. In 2017, some of the things that we accomplished and how we eventually achieved that elite status is we did pass a healthy vending policy that we're in the process of implementing right now. So I believe we have another year before we're trying to be 100% healthier vending. But we are working with a vending company, as you guys are probably aware, there's one out here. It's a process to kind of keep them in line with our healthier vending options that we would prefer, but we are working through that. And then the rec center as well has adopted healthier vending and concessions. And so if you go over there, you'll notice that there's some HEAL stickers that designate currently what's the healthier options and what are the unhealthy options. We also passed through the city's Smart Living Committee, which focuses specifically on employee health, a healthy meeting guideline policy. And that just encourages at city meetings that we include a healthy option for people to choose, as well as whatever else is being offered at that meeting. It encourages walking meetings and just other behaviors that are healthier, meeting breaks after an hour so that people can get up and walk around. We also offered last year and plan to offer again this year community classes. Last year our community classes focused on urban agriculture because we had just passed bees and chickens ordinances, as well as started the Garden in a Box program. And so our classes were beekeeping 101, keeping backyard chickens, and then also urban agriculture, so how to really foster that garden of your own. We had around 6 to 9 people attend each class, and the committee wants to, again, offer community classes. We just haven't decided on our topics yet this year. We also have partnered with the rec center, and they have offered a free yoga and boot camp class, and so we've been working with them to promote those classes in the summer. I believe they're at the park, E.B. Raines Park. And then also with the water department with the Garden in a Box and working to conserve water resources. One of the boxes that they offer is a vegetable garden, and so the HEAL committee has really promoted that the community get on board with those gardens and conserve water, but also create that healthy access to food in their own backyard. And so I'll turn it over to Ashley to talk a little bit more about what we did in 2017.
Sure, we had some really fun events this summer. This year we decided to partner with Parks and Rec for Kids to Parks Day, which is typically on May 20th each year. Unfortunately, weather didn't really cooperate with us this year, or this past year, so we actually ended up incorporating it with the next event, which was our inaugural HEAL Day. So we have a very successful kids fishing derby, as I'm sure you all know. And so this last year we worked with our event staff to incorporate what we were calling HEAL Day and a bike rodeo. Bicycle Colorado helped us out by setting up kind of an obstacle course and a learn to ride for children to do kind of a bicycle course around the basketball courts. And then we also invited healthy vendors to set up along the stretch too. And so then we were able to capitalize on a really successful event that's family friendly and kind of expand our offerings. So we do kind of want to expand that even more this year, and it'll be called Derby Day to really make sure that we get the biking aspect and the fishing aspect. HEAL committee did set up a table and had a booth. We offered fruit-infused water, and then we had fruit-infused water bottles to give away. So we thought that really went well with kind of, we paired with some other organizations that did a Rethink Your Drink activity, and so we thought it paired really well with that. We also gave out children's jump ropes for free with the HEAL logo. And then we brought in the CU Extension program. They did blender bikes where people could pick their own fruit and have them in a blender and ride the bike and make their own smoothie, and that was a really big hit. So, so we thought it was a really fun offering to expand an already successful program and really incorporate some of the HEAL aspects. And we did end up having the Kids to Park Day activities that we had planned for May 20th available at the event too. So we had some lawn games for people, hula hoops. Buddy the Bison was walking around, and he really got into it. As part of this, we also had stage demos of different classes. We had a yoga and a Zumba and a family boot camp, and I know Buddy did some Zumba with the kids and families too. So it seemed like a really fun event, and we're hoping to really grow it this year too. We participated in Bike to Work Day. We had a booth and handed out water from the city, as well as bike water bottles. We'll be doing that again this summer. I believe it's June 27th, but it's always, I think, the last Wednesday of the month in June. So come and join us at E.B. Raines Park for that. And then this year, the HEAL committee, at least the staff, participated in the Employee Wellness Fair, and we did a similar Rethink Your Drink activity that we had at HEAL, just encouraging people to think about how much sugar is in the typical drinks that you might have during the day. And then Connect Northglenn, as you all know, we just recently adopted, but the HEAL committee did have a really integral part. They received monthly updates. They received a demo on our online interactive mapping tool, and they did kind of mapping exercises along the way. And then in September, they had a joint meeting with our Planning Commission to review the recommendations and provide feedback on those. So they were a really big part of that policy getting passed, and we were really happy to have their support. You may have noticed some new bike racks outside this entrance and up at the front entrance. So this was part of the Heal Cities and Towns campaign small grant program that we applied for, I believe, in August of this year, and then had from November until the end of February to implement of this year. And so it was really implementing Connect Northglenn recommendations, but having bicycle infrastructure to make the choice to bicycle to our recreation facilities, to our city facilities, an easier choice. And then so with that grant, we were able to purchase 24 of the custom Northglenn logo bike racks, and then 1 new bicycle repair station and air kit, which was placed at Northwest Open Space. And one of our employees, Jenny Murphy, said she was out there walking last Saturday and saw someone getting air in their tires on her way out, and then a new person using it on the way back in. So we're really excited about that one. We think it'll be really heavily used out there at Northwest Open Space. We do have one at EB Rains Park, and so this was our second addition. And then the bike racks, we were able to place 12 of them at city-owned facilities and parks. So again, there's some at City Hall, there's also some next door at the Senior Center and Recreation Center, and then I believe the other 9 are interspersed throughout parks in the city. And we worked with the Parks and Rec department to figure out the best locations, and then the HEAL committee took a look at those locations and blessed them too. And they, again, helped pick where the bicycle repair station should be located. So we're really excited about that program, and having the HEAL committee in place we think was really helpful to getting support for the grant. One of their criteria was having community support, and so being able to point to the HEAL committee and showing how we would be using their input, and already having that institutionalized, we really felt like that was a plus and helped us get the grant approved. So. All right. Rounding out 2017, our Snowstormers Business Challenge. This is businesses that have signed up to shovel snow for elderly or disabled residents who are not able to do it on their own. This year, I believe we had 4 businesses participating, which I think was an increase of last year, and we just brought a new one on for this season, which was exciting, and got to bring on, I think, 7 new houses. We are really looking to grow this in the next year, so it's one of the ones on our list we'd like to improve. And then the HEAL Business Challenge was brand new. We launched it at the Business Appreciation Breakfast, I think at the beginning of December. The HEAL Committee worked to develop criteria that businesses can meet by, again, kind of meeting that same access to healthy eating, access to active living, and then having a healthy workplace, to really encourage having the business community kind of support the city's overall effort for HEAL. So the committee was really great in helping shape the program and coming up with, again, the criteria, the kind of programs that would qualify to meet what we're looking for, and then they'll also have a role in reviewing the applications and deciding when businesses submit whether or not they meet certain criteria and what level they should be coming in at. And again, this is a really new program. We just received our first application, and the HEAL committee will be reviewing it at their meeting tomorrow. So.
And then do they get certified through you? I apologize.
Yeah, so it's really a recognition program, so they'll be getting like a certificate and a sticker they can put in their window, and then we'll probably, once we have a group of them, we'll probably have them to a city council meeting to be recognized, and on our social media, kind of a shout out to them as well. So it's a pretty low cost program at this point, but we're kind of hoping to build momentum as we go along. We do have really nice glossy posters that look like this picture on the left. So if anyone's interested, if council members engage with businesses, we do have a really large stack of them up in my office. I'd be happy to provide you with some to be able to hand them out and help promote the program. In terms of 2018 plans, we're, as Becky said, we're hoping to do community classes again. We're really hoping to capitalize on these successful programs and events that we had last year and do them again and grow them. Derby Day will be growing and kind of changing a little bit this year, and we will be formally incorporating Kids to Parks Day with that event as well. And then Bike to Work Day too. We did a winter Bike to Work Day earlier this year already in February out by the lake. And we do have some really cool Heel logo bike bells to give away, and then we have some Heel logo salad shakers and some leftover jump ropes from last year to be giving away too, to just really promote to the community these ideals. We really want to grow the newer programs, like I talked about, the Snowstormers program, the Heel Business Challenge. One other program that the committee has really looked at, has researched and done a lot of exploration into is a community garden water credit program. And so they've expressed a lot of support for it, but we haven't had funding as of yet. So if the council's interested, we could bring forward a proposal or include it with a budget request package for 2019. And then again, the committee will be reviewing Heel-related policies that the city will be bringing forward. One will likely be the Complete Streets policy that we talked about adopting this fall. And then I think they'll have an integral part if we find grant opportunities. We've already discussed having a similar grant application for the Adams County Open Space Program for bike repair stations and or bike racks again. So I think they'll have a role in reviewing that application and deciding kind of the appropriate locations for that too.
Also, I would just mention, we did include in your packet the 2018 HEAL Committee work plan, and so that goes into more detail on some of our initiatives that we're currently looking at. And if you guys did have any questions on anything that's in there, we're happy to answer them at this time. Or if you have any ideas that you want us to bring back to the HEAL Committee, we'd be happy to hear that too.
Any questions for Becky or Ashley?
I have a couple. Thank you. This is a fantastic update. I love the bike and air fitness stations. That's really cool. So I have a couple of questions. One is, do you have any sense of how many folks participated in the Bike to Work Day last year?
So typically we have close to 100. It was slightly less. I want to say it was more in the 80 range, and we think it may have had to do with the underpass having been closed. Yeah, so we, Smart Commute Metro North, which is our regional transportation management organization, they host the station, and then the city is usually one of the vendors or booths. And so they organize it, but we did have slightly less this past year, but we're hoping to get that back up this summer.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
That's great. And then as being a part of, I guess, Live Well and this campaign that they're working on, but do they provide resources around what other cities are doing and help give you guys some sort of ideas for new things that maybe our city could try?
Yeah, they actually have a whole resource library available online, as well as technical assistance that we can reach out to them at any point if we're trying to work through something. They're now specifically focused on just the areas of active living and healthy eating. So they have peeled off that healthy workplace component as far as what they're providing technical assistance for. But they're always a good resource. Even if we want to find someone with a healthy workplace, they can point us in that direction still.
Great.
Or of someone.
And then I was reading in the 2018 plan around trying to expand residential
Food sales for foods that's been grown in the garden. And so I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, as well as if there's any possibility for bringing more farmers markets and fresh food options to the city.
Yeah, that is something that the committee has been pushing for in terms of the update to the UDO. So what we've been talking with the consultants about with this regard is to expand what we allow for cottage goods sales to encompass everything that's under that act versus just eggs and honey, which is currently what the city allows since we passed the bees and chickens ordinances, sorry. So we are looking at that through the UDO, and then we're also looking to allow food stands or farmers markets in certain zone districts, which would allow those uses in more areas too without a more stringent permitting process, or frankly right now we don't really have an avenue to get there. So every time we get a request, we're trying to figure out, well, how do we deal with this? So we're hoping to have that really clearly addressed in the new code.
Thank you.
So.
Any other questions? I would just like to say it's great that we've seen this really incorporated into Northglenn. You guys have done so many things, and we were involved from the beginning, so it's nice to see this program really take off. But I do have a question as far as a lot of cities have attained elite status. So has LiveWell kind of revamped the plateaus, or do you know what other cities are doing once they've reached the elite?
Yeah, so I have spoken with Julie George, who's the rep for LiveWell, a little bit about this, and some of the areas that they're looking at is adding maybe greater achievement levels, which would go beyond just passing policy, but then looking more at implementation. They haven't actually incorporated that yet into the program, but they are definitely aware that more and more cities are achieving this elite status, and that the program will probably get somewhat stagnant if there's not some competition, or, you know, just makes it more fun. So.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, any other questions for Becky or Ashley? No?
One question. So I see that social health is one of the focus areas, one of the 4 areas. What ideas for 2018 specifically target that?
So what we're really trying to do, and the Snowstormers program would be a good example, is kind of foster that volunteerism. We've talked a little bit about mental health as well, and how we could possibly incorporate that. One of the ideas floated in the committee meetings, although we haven't decided anything yet, was possibly partnering with the Reach Center or someone that does that mental health 101 class or something like that, and offer that to the community. So those are things that we're talking about, but we haven't, beyond the Snowstormers program, totally decided on what we're going to do as far as that is concerned.
Very much. Appreciate it. All right, our next agenda item will be the Justice Center operating cost estimates with Chief May.
So I'll just make a couple intro comments on this one. We got a couple items with the police department. The first one's related to the capital project, the Justice Center, and the chief has done a great job working with Mr. Willett to come up with what we think is going to be essentially the increase to the budget next year, because we've got a brand new building we've got to operate and maintain. And so I don't want to steal his thunder. I'll let him kind of walk through what he's come up with, and of course here to answer questions with him as well. So go ahead.
Mayor, Council, good evening. It's like a Chief May doubleheader tonight, so we'll move right through this. So one of the things we looked at, if you go to the attachment, that was, I think I can explain a little better there. So we worked with ME Group, who was our mechanical engineering group on the Justice Center, and they gave some estimates of what they believe the possible cost will be. Some exciting things, though, about this new building. It's going to be a lot more energy efficient. We have solar going on it. So I'm hoping this is a high estimate when, and I hope everything kicks in. Again, we're a 24/7 operation. However, with some of the technologies and everything else, with lights turning off by themselves and everything else, so we'll be primarily in one location, PD, during the night. So I'm hoping that we'll see some savings there. The other stuff I got with Bob Lear with technology, and some of the service contracts that we have, and they're all listed there. Vonage, CenturyLink, Comcast, going down there. Doug with maintenance operations, some of the things that he has to deal, some of the recertifications and costs. So it goes down there, and we have some of those costs at the bottom. The other thing too in this new building was really important was to make sure that staff was safe. Especially, we're all secure most of the time, but during court days, there's access to the judge and certain staff members. So in the new building, there will be an X-ray machine, and there will be a metal detector. So we're asking for, the courts is asking for contracted security, so that's 5 times a month. And there'll be 2 that will work those machines. And then we'll have one of our police officers actually as the court bailiff still, which we provide currently. But that cost for the security, we already looked at firms. Actually, our security here tonight, they provide that for Commerce City. So that'll be an easy transition, I think, for the new building. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. When I go into Adams County, into the courthouse, you go through the scanner every time, your stuff gets x-rayed every time. Will that be the same case at ours, or will that only happen on court dates?
It'll only happen on court days, because most of the other days, everybody's behind, the security systems that we have in place. So, so there's really not a need. Okay. But when the court is, there's a lot of access, to the building and everything else.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yep. So looking at that and the operations cost, as you can see that it comes to about $160,929. That's just an estimate, So, and then we're looking at, what's it going to cost personnel-wise. So, talking with David, what they did a couple years ago, a staff analysis of the maintenance operation and Doug's crew, and they figured with Parks building coming online and everything else, it's like a 0.5 FTA they needed. So they haven't gotten that yet, but with the new Justice Center coming online and some of the warranty work and some of the things that they want to keep track of, Doug felt that with that, the new Parks building, some of the aging maintenance going on in these buildings, he could use a full-time 1 FTE. So that cost is down there at $66,900. 2 custodial staff, and this is where we can be kind of creative. We are vacating this lower level, and the city managers want the amount of work that'll take. So we have 2 up there, and we have 2 down here, but we're thinking maybe we can do with 1 in this building and then just take 1. So we probably only need 1 custodial staff to start out with, and we'll see how that goes. The first year or 2, if there is a bigger need, either location to add to that staff. So we're trying to be real creative. There's other ideas going out there on how we can be more efficient, more effective with our custodial staff too. So,
yes. I think this one's towards Jim. What's the cost for this building? Just curious.
Jason was saying it's a little over $100,000.
Oh, okay. So
and this is about 38,000 square feet.
Do we have an estimate of what it's going to cost to keep this place, monthly or yearly, that we're going to keep this place going once everybody's gone?
The only thing that would probably change is custodial on the lower level, where I saw the first just concept of the City Hall space assessment last week, and we've got some ideas for down here, but probably not full-time employees down here on this level.
So we should actually save some money off electricity and things like that.
Well, we still have to heat and cool the building, so I think the only thing we'd really be saving on is custodial staff. Really? Because we're going to have climate-controlled storage that we're going to need down here, and so we could turn some lights off, but it's probably not going to be much less than the $100,000 we're already spending.
Thank you.
So with the personnel, I mean, if we had to do 2 custodial staff, Paula gave us some numbers of about $169,000. That's with benefits. But I think we can, work with those numbers and get those lower. That's the goal. Any questions?
Those beautiful windows, are you going to watch them 4 times a year?
You'll see me out there. Just
I think it's a lot of glass.
That's right. There's a lot of glass.
Yeah, it's beautiful. No questions? Getting off easy on it.
I know. An excellent one.
So again, just to highlight, this is probably going to be a package request for the 2019 budget. So as we're thinking about, especially as we do the debrief on some of the ideas of the retreat, this is unfortunately kind of a off the top that we've got to fund. We can't not operate the building, obviously, when we open it. So.
Question. Is there any sort of assessment
done before we started to build to try and anticipate what this would look like? Or is this
No,
just what
we
was
had a
done?
feeling that there was going to be more staff. We looked at actually an on-site facilities manager slash, for our police vehicles. There's a lot of time and effort goes in that. So we were looking at a lot of different things. But towards the end, we're like, okay, how can we get to it the most economic way? And so, with Doug's crew, needing another staff member, they can be used citywide. That's what, some of the ideas, they're being kicked around, a custodial group that can, impact certain areas that needs it. So, we might have 4 custodial staff under Doug or something. We can, hit, buildings in a more efficient, effective manner. So
I think what I was asking is more or less with, some of the work being done in the new rec center, trying to anticipate what some of the operating costs are now before we built it. And so I'm wondering if
I don't
there's
want to
anything
steal that thunder. I think that's coming up.
No, I'm asking
yeah.
about this building, the Justice Center in particular. Was anything done on the front end to try and anticipate what the cost was? I'm just curious and trying to compare, if this is the first time that
Yeah.
we're anticipating what the cost
No. I mean, I think we had, things that we thought that were going to, cost money. We knew, especially we're going to open a building and there's going to be energy cost.
If we withdrew and
The
would
ME
approve
group.
different parts of it, and like we chose, for instance, the heating and things like that, we knew where we were going with that, so we were looking at the cost not only of the heating unit, but is it going to save us money down the road? What is this,
Payoffs and all of that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of how what we're seeing here compares with what we thought it would be.
I will tell you, I don't remember exact numbers, but I do remember us kicking around that 100,000 figure. But that was without any personnel. So in my mind, it was going to be probably around 200 when we all is said and done. And now adding this personnel, this is like 330 now. So a little higher for sure then. But again, we didn't do any real detailed analysis other than with the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems.
Although on one of the spreadsheets that we had on the projections, that there was a line item that was around 100,000 though. I mean, it was a partial conversation, we just didn't dive into staff.
I think it was the estimates of what, the cost of
It was the
those
staff
systems.
that's different in this one.
Right.
So that's a pretty big jump then.
I think the staff pushes it, but I think the number as far as what they were anticipating for some of the operational side without the additional staff, I think that number seems to be what I would call it being one of the spreadsheets. I don't know if that was a spreadsheet that carried through, but when we were telling you to put the pencil to the paper, I feel like 100,000 was what was in that number.
We did make this security decision also afterwards too, the 35. So it's probably not too far off from what we were originally estimating, but it's just got a lot more finer detail.
Because we definitely didn't talk about how many times the fire extinguishers or the window cleaning and stuff like that would be. It was just the more expensive items.
And Comcast and all that, you put all those little costs together, they add up, in a short time. So. Okay. I would like to bring up Renee Lair. She's going to help me with this next presentation. Okay, the police staffing plan. So tonight I'd like to accomplish, giving you some historical information on where we were, where we currently are, and where we would like to be to give the level of service, police service that you guys are wanting in our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Renee, and she's going to go over some of the math and everything else and how we got there using some national standards.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Renee Lair. You might recognize my name as the police PIO, but I'm also the analyst, which I've been for 14 years for Northglenn. So that's why I'm here tonight. And the chief asked me to just go over a few slides regarding the analyses that we completed over the past few years. I'm going to start off by providing a little background on the 5 common methods that you can use for staffing needs. The first is crime levels, which is based on the more crime you have in a jurisdiction, the more officers you need to hire to combat that crime. The second is per capita. We're all familiar with that. The number of officers correlated to the population. Currently, Northglenn has 1.58 officers per 1,000 population. Our minimum manning levels, it's often written into policy based on kind of best practices or supervisory judgment. It's kind of the way it's always been, the thought of how many minimum we need per shift. The authorized budgeted levels, and that's basically what's approved through the budget process. And finally, the most effective is the workload analysis. It's the method that we used in 2012. Basically, it matches the demand for police services to the supply to the demand. So in 2012, we looked at a workload analysis, and we actually looked at the actual accounting hours we extracted from our CAD system, as well as the Springbrook financial system. And we looked at time spent on duty, and the first area we looked at is obligated time. And in other terms, it could be called reactive police patrol time. And basically, it's a services a patrol unit are required to provide or respond to. So it's that shoplifting call, or that, vehicle that's been broken into call. And on a really bad day, it's that shots fired call. We also looked at unobligated time, and this is the proactive time in police work. And this is really where we get the most bang for our buck. It's getting to know the folks in our community, whether it's our businesses or, the daycare provider that brings kids to the park during the summer. It's the homeowners in a particular neighborhood. It's, engaging with the residents at Coffee with the Mayor or Cops versus Basketball. So really it's about increasing our communication and our interactions with the residents in Northglenn, with the business owners in Northglenn, so that we can build those partnerships. And finally, we looked at the regular and benefited time off, so the vacation, the FMLA, the light duty, those kinds of things. So this slide kind of wraps it all up. We looked at our data requirements. We extracted data from our records management system, from our CAD system. We pulled from our training schedules, the payroll system. Basically what we did is we used Northwestern University, their methodology. The chief attended one of their schools. It's a nationally recognized command level school. So what we did is we pulled all of our numbers and we plugged it into their formulas, and we came out with the recommended number of patrol officers.
Did in your analysis, did we pull in overtime and things like that and look at how much overtime was
Yes, we
being?
did. It was through the payroll system.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to ask questions, especially when it comes to all these numbers. Renee would love to answer all those. So
then I'm going to ask you another question.
Sure.
When you looked at overtime, did you count that as an extra FTE? How did that play into your calculations?
So we didn't look at FTE. In 2015, we did a traditional FTE study. In 2012, we took all of the time spent out on duty, whether it was court time or admin time, or it was all of the hours put together. And on the previous page kind of shows some of the calculations that we used for the benefited time off. So we included general leave, personal leave, military leave. And this, like I said, it was done in 2012. So the data is specific to 2012. It would look different if we ran our numbers for 2018, 2017.
Is why using 2012 data?
This was a very intense, labor-intensive project. So what we had done then was we pulled all of the data for the entire year and we analyzed it and we came up with the 36 officers as first responders. And then in 2015, we did the FTE, the traditional FTE, and we came up with a very similar number. And we anticipate doing another study once we settle into the Justice Center and our workflow is kind of established. So speaking of the 2018-2019 peak workload is what we're looking at doing. What this study would consist of is pulling 1 month during the winter months and 1 month during the summer months. We would get a 24-hour period for a weekday and a weekend. And we would look at the peak workload, and in this case it's the 12 a.m. hour, which is 7.52. This study says the benchmark is you don't want officers to have any more than 60% obligated time. So the calculation would be the peak workload of 7.52 divided by the 60%. That would give us 12.5 officers. The second benchmark is your officers, you wouldn't have any more than 75% of your officers available at any one time. So we take that 12.5 number of officers and we divide that by the 75%, we get 17 officers. So essentially what it does is it gives us the breakdown over each hour of a 24-hour period of the peak number of officers that we would need and, well, the maximum number of officers we need and the minimum number of officers we need. So that would help us out with our allocation of officers going forward.
Renee, can you say how that compares to our actual staffing then? What this is saying is the best case scenario, and then...
We have not done this analysis yet. We anticipate on doing it once we get settled into our new Justice Center, because I think our processes might change some of our workload. So we anticipate doing that in the future.
So in 2017, we had a 4-command structure. In 2018, we lost a commander last year, and so we had to condense our command structure to 3. So we had to spread out that that workload to the other 3 commanders and myself. Which wasn't difficult. Now, some other slides, I'll show you why we were able to, get rid of that support position. But we're going to need that position back in if we stick to the work plan. The next slide shows in the large pie shape what our total. This is like a snapshot of our January 2018 actual sworn allocation. So in the blue box, 39 officers are first responders. In the green box, that's 24. That's your command staff, your detectives, sergeants. Oh, go ahead.
I need to go back a slide, and I apologize, but I thought I would raise my hand before.
Okay.
Can you please explain to me 4.17? What does that represent? Does that represent cases? Does that represent officers on duty at that time? What does the 4.17 represent?
That represents hours. So if we had 6 officers on duty, there was 4 hours and 17 minutes on that 12 a.m. hour that they were on obligated time. And then if you look to the far right, I guess it's far right, the 12.5 is officers and the 17 is officers. Everything else is hours.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. And everything else on this side over here is all unallocated? I mean, it's...
On the left side would be obligated.
Okay.
Responding to calls.
That's correct.
I think Mayor Dodge asked if these were real, and you said they were not.
These are not. This is an example that I'm just showing you, so if we do it in the future, you'd have an understanding of what that looks like. Not actual.
We are getting into
just going to do the math.
The next slide is we're getting into our actual So this is a snapshot of January 20 actual sworn allocation. So in that the big pie shape, that shows our overall allocation of 24 in kind of like command staff, detectives, special units. The 39 are our first responders. And then that smaller pie shape shows that 25, which is 64%, are in that patrol function. This is of January. 10% of those, which was 4 officers, we had an officer-involved shooting in December, so those 4 officers are on desk duty. We have 3 in the academy, we have 4 in FTO, we had 2 light duty, and we had 1 in FMLA as of January. So that takes a huge impact to the patrol division and trying to field that. From that, we had to pull our traffic unit back into patrol. We also had to pull, we have 2 community relations officers, but half their time was spent back in patrol, either training officers, and the other half was pretty much spent on the homeless initiative. Go ahead.
FTO?
I'm sorry. And that's it. Stop me if I start doing all the police jargon. That's a field training officer. And they're actually, the FTO I mentioned here was that they're in their field training program. So, but when you look at that FTO and you see that 10% of them are there, that means that's 4 officers. But if you look over to the other 25, that means 4 officers are training those people. And when you're training somebody, you're not as efficient when you're by yourself. So really, we figured out you spent, it's about, you get half the work done when you're training a new officer. So that's another drain on resources when they're in training mode. And we'll go over that in another slide coming down on how many officers we've trained over the last several years. So if you go to the next slide, and this one's not supposed to scare you. So this is your experience, okay, out there in the street. And this is your first responders. So you can see the biggest pie right there is 38%, and that's less than 3 years experience. Well, that's kind of deceiving because that's 3 years experience, but a third of that was spent in training. It takes almost a year to get them trained up. So almost 60% of your officers have less than 5 years experience. So what's this mean to us? That means that we have to make sure that we're developing and we're training. The only way to make up for experience is training. Okay, go ahead.
It says years of service on the Northglenn PD. Do we hire anybody that has previous experience?
We do, and I think, I don't know if this includes that or not. It's not many though. We get most of the people that are brand new.
That are brand new.
So historically, this is the thing that goes all the way back to 2008. The top number, if you can see, in the bar graph, go back to 2008. We had a budgeted sworn of 70 back in 2008, but during that year, we only had 69 officers actually working. So the top number is budgeted. The lower number is the ones that are actually working. As you can see, as the years progress and where we're at, historically, especially over the last 5 years, we've been at 8 to 10% down from our budgeted to what we, from budgeted to actual that we're actually working.
So what do we do with the difference? That money, does it roll over each year?
Goes back in the general fund, which is a good example. We heard Jason's financial report. I think we budgeted a $20,000 to $40,000 surplus in 2017, and we're probably going to have about $1 million we're going to put back into the general fund. Now, that's not all just not hiring police officers. That's people being smart with their budgets too, but it does go back to the general fund.
So, quick question. The difference between those two numbers, is it because people are in FMLA or other reasons, or they're training, or is it everybody's higher, or why are we not meeting those numbers? Is it just because we didn't have enough hires?
That's part of it. There are some that are in the academy. It's so the numbers that you're seeing here are the FBI reported numbers of we take the time that they're on the job and actually working, and that's what we report to the FBI. So that's the ones that are actually working. And Renee could probably talk to that little better in how she, reports that. But it's even higher. So this is, a lot of vacancies, but it's even higher. In this number, we don't account for the ones that are FMLA or an admin or injured. So really, this last year, it's been 10 to 15%. That's where, we've been hanging out at with the amount of officers. I mean, you think about it, you go back to that one slide, what did that say? We were 18, almost 18 officers down in January out of a complement of 66. I don't know what that percentage is, but it's probably pretty high.
So Chief, would it be fair to say if we look at the 2017 column, we had a 68 officer complement budgeted in 2017. At the end of the year, you only had 64 officers that were actually hired and working for the city, and of that, some of them may have been admin duty, FMLA, et cetera. So you don't have 64 officers on the street.
That's right.
And you had 4 vacancies, essentially.
I was interpreting that differently. So the 4, if they're vacancies, that's money that we're not spending. But people that are not on the street are still costing us money.
Right. We're still paying their salary, they're just not on patrol.
Right.
Correct.
So this is showing vacancies that money is not being spent. This is not showing people that are on leave.
Correct. We had 4 vacancies pretty much all last year. And we had 5.
Chief, I think you and I have talked about this a little bit before, but if we've got money budgeted for these officers, why do we have vacancies?
Right now, it's very difficult to hire. Several years ago, we'd have probably 3-4 years ago, we'd have 300 to 500 people apply. This last time, we had 90. We took, I think, 30 to oral boards. And now that 30, I'll be lucky to get 3 or 4. And so we haven't been able, and that's the thing, it's been a challenge. And I had a green light, from the city manager. He goes, Jim, if you get the bodies, we'll go back to council and say, let's, try overhires or try to fill those gaps. Because it does. And a slide coming up, you'll see how long it takes to train and get someone ready for the street. But so if you know people that's out there that want to be police officers,
Antonio's out there.
Do you feel that our current climate is affecting the number of people that you're getting in who want to apply for the jobs? Is that the current climate from the shootings that we've had against officers and
I have some of the slides, that's in the deck that I think I can actually answer that for you, if you don't mind, if I can get to that.
You don't have to wait long. Here it
You
comes.
don't? Okay.
I have one last question for you.
Yeah. On this slide, there's a note about officer retention and how we close the gap. And so I'm just curious, what do we need to do to retain some of our officers so that we're keeping the folks who have experience and the folks who are gaining their experience want to stay here? What do we have to do to make Northglenn Police Department the best place to work in the metro area?
Well, I think some of the things are being addressed. Career development is huge, and that's why, and that's one thing I think when people come here, they know that you get a lot of training. Compared to our post, that's, the Police Standards Board, they have a certain amount of hours that we have to hit every year. We normally do probably 3-4 times that. And that's for 2 reasons. One, I want to make sure I'm providing the best officers possible to serve our community, but 2, to make sure I get their level of expertise up quickly. So it's real important to do that. Competitive pay, I think that's the thing of just being consistent, trying to get to a point where, it's consistent. I know, city manager and finance director and Paul, and we're all working trying to get that where it's ironed out, where they see some more, that consistent. The benefit package, I think, is great here in Northglenn. I think, you guys really provide a great benefit package. Some of the things that we're doing that's a little different and out of the box are off-duty. So we have, a lot of off-duty jobs in Northglenn, but there's not a lot like Denver or Aurora where they have a lot of businesses. But Commerce City needed some help with their stadium, and they asked us, hey, would you sign a contract with us, which you guys agreed to allow our officers to go work off-duty over there. So they've been taking advantage of that. Lateral movement and those, investigations, our undercover officers, our special assignments, our community relations, our traffic teams. Those are, you know, those do the most impact, you know, for traffic safety, community policing with our community relations officers, our SROs. So those units are very important to do that proactive policing to make that huge impact on crime prevention. So to answer your question, I think we're doing a lot. It's just, you know, trying to get the personnel there. Have you heard anything else that I'm missing? No?
No, I think we tried to list the things on the slide that we're trying to do to keep our officers, to recruit our officers and then retain them.
One thing that I do want to mention though, and I'll get to that, is just the amount of work. When they're working short, the burnout and everything else. I think that gets to the time, I know we lost an officer to Arvada, and he says, you know, he was a detective, and he goes, man, I could go to Arvada and have half the caseload of what it is at Northglenn. So we're busy. We're a very busy city. We don't have as many detectives as some of the other agencies, and our caseloads are a little higher. So, you know, just trying to come up where it gives them some relief so we don't get that burnout. I think that's real important as well.
I was just going to add, I think, you know, a lot of departments have a step system. We have a step system with our regular employees as well. But we move our officers through that system in 5 years. So they can get topped out with their pay within 5 years. And last year, which I think took effect in the 17 or the 18 budget, is that we created this new position of senior police officer. So when you are at that 10-year point, you get this higher level pay of senior police officer. The key there, as you saw from some of the pie charts, we got a lot of officers been here 5 years or less, and we really want them in that 5 to 10 year range, because that's when they're really experienced and really able to add a lot more value even than a newer officer would. So we're trying to motivate people to stay here and hold that carrot out there, if you will.
Have you asked your officers what would make them want to stay? Have you surveyed them all?
I haven't surveyed them recently. I think, you know, I think pays always comes up, you know, and they talk to neighbors and everybody else. But as long as we're competitive and in the ballpark, I think we're good. They don't expect us to make what a Denver makes. They don't expect us to make what a Westminster or Thornton makes. But they just want to be, you know, competitive. I think that's what their big push is. The next slide is over like a 5-year snapshot of the new hires that we've hired. Again, you can see those numbers, and then you can imagine all the FTOs it took to train all those officers that year. But the hiring process that we were talking about earlier, it's a 5-month process. We just did oral boards, okay? So, but from the time they do their application to the time I, you know, give them a job offer, it's 5 months. And then, if they're post-certified, which means they've already been through academy or they came from another department, they can jump right into our in-house training. But if not, they go to the academy, which is a 22-week academy. After that, after the in-service, then they do their 12-week field training program. And if they're successful in that, they move to a 2-week evaluation. And what we've seen in that 12 weeks, we've been, you know, that's one thing in law enforcement. When I started, I think, gosh, Ron and I think we went through how many weeks on the road? Maybe 8, you know, and then they put us out. But the technology and everything else that that these officers have to learn today, and de-escalation training, and how to communicate with the mental health issues, and so there's a lot of stuff that these officers have to learn. So we're flexible on that 12-week program. If they're struggling, and everybody struggles in something, it's either the radio or if it's report writing, it could be numerous things that they can struggle. Officer safety. I mean, it's amazing how many things you have to think about. You think of a traffic stop, there's like 100 things an officer has to do before that contact with that person. So there's a lot that they have to learn during that 12 weeks. So we're flexible. Sometimes, we might push it a couple weeks just to make sure that we try to make them successful through this program. It's not like the old days where the field training officer would pull up to McDonald's and grab an application for you and say, "You're not going to make it. Might as well fill this out." Because we're at a lot. Today it's more like, hey, we want them to be successful. We're more positive, more encouraging for them to get through the program because we know it's hard. Go ahead.
Quick question. Do you have a number figure of how much it costs to train and bring on a new hire?
So several years ago, we did, but by the time they hit that 3-year mark, we're figuring we have about $150,000 invested in them. With all the training, with all the field, officers training, the academy, the equipment, all of that. So. And it takes them 3 years to actually give back. They need a lot of hand-holding those first 3 years.
Another question, why do you think that there is a lack of officers between 5 and 10 years of service? Why do they leave after 5 years? Or
there's some things that we can't provide. I mean, we don't have, an actual homicide division. So our detectives pretty much are all generalists. So they have to be able to handle from a simple burglary to a homicide. So, and we do have some senior detectives that have been there along, our core detectives, that add to that expertise for those younger detectives. But yeah, so we have to be able to adapt and adjust to everything. So I think that, and if we don't have that, they move on to a larger department.
Yeah. So the data on the bottom that talks about officers not meeting the standard, that actually makes me happy. And the reason it does is because that tells me that you have really high standards and you're not just letting anybody in. Well, I need to know that you are, I don't care about those 3. Yeah. If they didn't cut it, they don't get to stay. Yeah. So the fact that you draw that line makes me feel better.
Well, and that's not just us, them not meeting the standards. I mean, there's quite a few that didn't in this group, but there's also, in the last couple of years, I've had, I think, 3 or 4 come to me and say, whoa, I'm not cut out for this. It's pretty scary out there. And they ended up, self-selecting, which is good. I mean, they realize that because we don't want them to be, safety issue for themselves or other officers when they're out there. So, but yeah, that's a 32% termination rate.
Well, I hear what you're saying about the coaching and the support and the training, and that's awesome. But we don't want people out there that are not 100% ready to be out there.
That's true.
With support, right? So
and those are hard decisions. You see the heart in some of them, but it's just not there.
So this next slide illustrates the workload in terms of our incident reports, our traffic accidents, and our arrests. And remember, the analysis that we had done was in 2012, so you can see how the numbers have changed from 2012 to 2017. There's an increase in our incident reports, our traffic reports, and a little less in our arrests. But there's a lot more to look at than just these type of numbers. Given the nature and the number of incidents that we've had in terms of critical incidents over the past few years, there's been numerous added responsibilities in law enforcement. And House bills, for example, those are completely unfunded, unstaffed mandates on law enforcement. For example, you've heard of all of the school shootings that have happened. We're mandated by a House bill to capture and report all of our arrests at our elementary schools, our middle schools, our high schools, and any college classroom in our jurisdiction. All of the officer-involved shootings that have occurred, we're mandated now to capture and report very, very detailed information on all of those shootings. From information, what occurred before the shots were fired, to what verbal commands were given before the shots were fired, what were the suspects and the officers' actions before the shots were fired. So there's a whole lot more reporting that we're mandated because you were talking about, today's climate in law enforcement. There's another House bill for additional hours of training in de-escalation, anti-bias, community policing. Again, we're trying to build those relationships and build that trust in law enforcement again today. I'm sure you've all heard about the opioid epidemic. Our officers are trained for the administration of Narcan, and those are life and death cases, so it's very critical that we have the training and then we have additional reporting that we have to do for those cases as well. We've talked about this a lot lately, the increase in our transient population. Our community resource officers have been addressing the camps and educating the community and trying to build those partnerships. And then, you know, it's always technology advancements. We have a system that extracts data and analyzes it on cell phones, our mobile devices. The DA now requires electronic submission into a portal that we never used to have to do. We're getting a new CAD. We've implemented a new CAD system, implementing a new RMS. So the list kind of goes on and on. There's always new technology. So definitely our workload has increased, and not all of it is, you know, displayed in numbers. It's some workflow and demands that are put on us that we haven't had to do before.
This next is a comparison slide with other like-sized jurisdictions. There's a lot of numbers on there, but just sum up some of it. So with this group, we're in the top 3 when it comes to violent crime, and that's murder, non-negligent manslaughter, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault. Top 4 in property crimes. Top 3 in rental properties. We're in the top 3 of the below the poverty levels, top 3 lowest income, and we're the bottom 4 for amount of officers, you know, working the city. So that's just kind of like a snapshot of some of the other jurisdictions. That's like size. We do, you know, with Thornton and Westminster, we pulled some of the numbers. And that's based on 100,000 population, trying to get oranges to oranges. So that's how that data was put together. So.
A lot of the stats are really similar to Wheat Ridge, and I was trying to remember, did the superintendent mention that the SROs are a shared cost?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. So we pay for half and the district pays for half? Okay. So in Wheat Ridge, for example, the district doesn't pay. So I'm wondering, is that just a city decision that they have SROs that Wheat Ridge pays for that might account for a handful of the extra ones that are in the schools? I don't know. I was just wondering about that. But they have 10 more and significantly fewer people.
Yeah, they have, and it doesn't show the command structures and all these. We have probably one of the leanest command structures in the metro area, you know, with just 3. I know they have a deputy chief and I think 4 commanders. So it's just different structures on that, but, you know, we're just trying to go by, and they have different, maybe they have different, you know, groups and under there. So I don't know how they have theirs broken out, but I think they also have dispatch.
Interesting concept to me.
So I guess Jefferson County doesn't, Jeffco schools don't pay.
I don't believe so. Because after that I asked, I was like, how does that work? Because Lakewood has a different process than Wheat Ridge does. Wheat Ridge has probably the most active SRO command structure, if that's what we call it, I don't know, group of people.
Adams Vault contracts are the same through all the jurisdictions.
Okay.
So several years, they were different, and I bet about 5 to 7 years ago, the school district got tired of different contracts, so they said, let's make this all the same, and that's how they paid out, because everybody, you know, someone had paid for training, so now it's just salaries. So. So one thing to look at those same cities, I'm going to just jump over in the next slide. In the bottom right corner, it's arrest. And as you can see, that we lead that group, especially in 2016, you know, with over 2,600 arrests that are officers. Keep in mind, you know, when we make a custodial arrest, it's at least 2 officers. That plus is there because we have a very young department. And, you know, and the Commander Lopez can, you know, he tells the sergeants, like, listen, when they make an arrest, I want a supervisor on scene, because really that's our responsibility. That's one thing, we can take someone's civil liberties away. So I want to make sure that sergeant has eyes on making sure we have the probable cause to make that arrest. So that takes 3 people on every arrest to, you know, to make sure they're there and watching that. So And then on the other side, it just shows, reinforces that slide before, property crime, violent crime. And last year, just to sum up some of the things that we responded to that needed at least 2 officer response, some or more, especially those, we had 2 officer-involved shootings. It involved 6 officers last year, 2 attempted murders, 1 homicide. We had 2 robberies, one that was an attempted homicide. Sexual assaults, we had probably 40 plus sexual assaults last year. So a lot of this, we have to have multiple officer, responses. Yeah?
I was just thinking, can you explain the data on the top right-hand corner?
Awesome. Yeah, that's right there. Thank you.
Is that the slide from the beginning of how many?
Yeah, just the self-reported.
Where it says comparison by jurisdiction number.
So again, this is this budgeted?
It's budgeted in actual officers. So ours is 63 and 68 for 2016.
So the first number is not budgeted and the next number is...
Actual.
Thank you.
Okay. This next slide shows over a 24-hour period what the minimum officer is on the street. So the first number, like the 3, is 3 supervisors. The next one are the amount of officers. So Inglewood has 3 supervisors and 13 officers in a 24-hour period. We have 3 supervisors and 10 officers in a 24-hour period. So what that means, day shift and graveyard shift is a supervisor, minimum of supervisor in 3. They can't go below that, or they're paying overtime. Also swing shift, we had to bump a graveyard officer to, and this was years ago, because we had to up the minimum staffing because I didn't think it was safe, to 1 and 4 on swing shift. Personally, I think it needs to be added a bump on each shift, because when they're working out there, it's just 1 and 3. It's tough. Like I just told you, when they have an arrest, that means there's 1 free officer in the city, and that depends if it's not a major call. The Walmart incident where we didn't assist, that was all of us. So, and that, we were calling people in, to backfill, the street. So when we have a critical incident, and that's the other thing with minimum staffing, we're only 1 call away from that next big thing, right? So we've learned, and the officers learned, that when you're out there and it's not busy, the last thing you want to do is doing these and end up with a warrant arrest or something else that you pick up, or you're doing some of that proactive stuff where you're impacting, apartment complexes and doing that. You have to stay available, because if there's a big incident and you're not available for your partners out there, that puts them at risk and everything else. So that's the other thing of trying to get past that minimum officer thing, so we have more officers out there. So, and that's where we've been living this last year. So with that, you can see our calls for service. That's a 5-year average. We're averaging over 50,000 calls for service, and it's not just the calls for service. I mean, that could be a cat in a tree, right? But our calls for service on the previous slide shows that we've seen a steady increase on the more serious issues. The other thing too is this is kind of unique to Northglenn or Adams County when we flag different residents, and we have 135 flagged addresses in Northglenn. And that's a multi-officer response. And that could be someone, mental health issues that we want to make sure that we have enough officers there to try to de-escalate that. All of your officers have been through the training of crisis intervention training. So since they go, when they're new, they go through a 40, it's an 8-hour course. When they have a couple years on, they go through a 40-hour course, and they have to be certified. And if they flunk it, I'm sending them back through it again. So that's really important on that de-escalation, in those cases. But then we have other, houses that are dangerous, so very volatile people in there. So, and we respond to those locations multiple times a year. You probably have some in your neighborhoods that you guys are aware of, so. All right, so this last year, like I've talked about, some of the things that we had to minimize. And you guys, a lot of you know who I am and how I got to this position because of my community policing initiatives over the years and how I push it and everything else. it's about community engagement, it's about partnerships, it's about community education. It's about going out there and really impacting some of our crime problems that we have. And I can tell you over the last couple of years, it's been very, very difficult to do that because we're in chaos mode, dealing with that and just you know, surviving. So, and that's why I'm here today, just letting you know, hey, where we're at. I know we can provide a lot better service than what we currently are. And still, the amount of service that we provide with as little as what we have is pretty darn good. You know, I compare myself with other jurisdictions, and we do a lot. So, but we can do so much more and be more impactful within our community. So I just want to let you guys know some of the things that just crushed me that I had to minimize or cancel. Our Citizens Academy. This is going on almost its 20th year, but we used to have 2 a year. This year, you know, so this last year we can only have 1. Our Teen Academy, we used to do 2 a year, and we only do 1 every 2 years now. Our Senior Academy with our senior citizens, we had to cut that where we only do 1 every 2 years. Crime Stoppers involvement. We just passed basic information. We, you know, some of my detectives can't go down there and attend some of those meetings because of their caseloads. Neighborhood Watch. At one time, we had 80+ Neighborhood Watch when we had a 4-person PIT team, problem interdiction team, that we were really growing those communities and looking out for, you know, each other. But now we're down to like 30, you know, so it's like, gosh, we need to, you know, get back and grow those. Officer training. This last year, we had to cut back on a lot of our officer training, and you know how I feel about that. It's like, we can't. You know, we have, and that's what I told you, it's like, we got to do what we can to make sure we get them that extra training to make sure that they're out there, they're being safe. Apartment managers meetings and business meetings, and all this is important for that education piece, to reduce that crime in the apartment managers. What rights do they have when they're dealing with crime on their properties? Same with business owners, you know, and we did, you know, we're trying to do that with, you know, some of the, you know, the transient population training that we are doing and everything else. Say, hey, this is, you know, what we can do. Let's guide them to services. Some things I had to eliminate last year. Our marketplace initiative. 2 years ago, we arrested 48 people in our marketplace doing impact. Okay, that's because I had officers down there all the time on bikes during Christmas. So people want to come to a place where they can, you know it's safe. People want to open businesses where they know that, you know, crime is low. So those are things we need to get back. Drug take back. We had to push people to other jurisdictions to drop off their drugs. Cops fighting cancer. This is a Christmas thing that we just didn't have the staffing to send down to Children's Hospital that we do every year this year. And our traffic team. You know, one of the what complaints do you guys get the most of is when it comes to traffic issues. I had to disband the traffic unit to bring them back to patrol, so we're not working always minimum on that patrol side. So these are things that, you know, decisions on that level of service that I think we can get back to. So the next slide shows when those interruptible things, okay, when we're dealing with citizens' calls, they can't be interrupted. I already talked about officer-initiated calls. If they're minimum staff, they're not out there really doing it because they don't want to put themselves out when there could be other things going on. So if you have more officers, then you have more traffic stops, you have more impact. You can do, you know, impact that crime triangle I always talk about, you know, where you look at the locations and how you can target hard and you know, educate the victims and go after the offenders. And we can do that with more officers. So with that, with the staffing plan, and we've had one, it was a 2020 plan called before, but new council on, and with this last year and budget and everything else, we push it 2022. This is a living document. It's always gonna, you know, it's gonna be changing, you know, depending on what kind of things. I didn't know we'd have a huge transient problem or an opioid problem that we have today. I mean, that washed in on us hard. And so we have to come up with the resources to deal with it. I don't know what the next big thing is, you know, that's gonna hit law enforcement. I hope it's a lot easier than the last couple of things we've been dealing with. But here is a 2022 look. That's bringing back that other commander because again, I strapped there's 2 of them here with a lot more responsibilities and everything else. And again, they're great at. That's one thing Northglenn teaches you. Ian and Ron and myself, I mean, when chaos happens, we're awesome at it, you know, but it's nice to be able to plan for those things, right? And train for those things and get ready for a lot of that. And we do some of it, but we can be a lot better in what we do. So this is where I'd like to be in 2022. And then it shows kind of that last pie, kind of more of a balanced pie shape. Even then, Renee talked about the per capita, officers per 1,000 people. With this complement, it takes us up to 1.8. There's studies out there saying if you, for reactive style policing, you need 1.5 to 1.75. If you want, community policing and special teams and units, you need, 2 officers per, 1,000. But but we're close at 1.8. That gets us pretty close. But then we have to look at that thing I talked about, that variance, that 8 to 10% variance that we talked about earlier. But what's that look like? If you want those special units, you want those traffic teams, you want that community policing group doing what they're supposed to do, then you have to look at, well, if that's a variance, for 70 officers, we're looking at 77. So that's, how do we get there? And that's, Jim and I, we've been talking, do we do that by overhire? Or is that the actual number of officers we need to shoot for? So that's where we're at. Yeah. And these are, these numbers are today's numbers. They're not, or actually yesterday's numbers. They're not the projections for 2022. So that's why this is a living document. Go ahead, Becky.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm all about getting you the resources that you need. My personal opinion, because we have such a, we have a little bit of a turnaround, this kind of thing, I would prefer to overstaff, but, by one person. But I do want to ask you a question. When because I'm not familiar at all on how this whole recruiting thing happens, right? So when we have an open job, we're open for officers or whatever, how do we recruit outside of the Colorado area? Because it seems to me that one of the things you mentioned is that we are getting less and less people who want to even go through the process to hit the orals to do this. So to me, one of the problems would be is that we need to figure out how to get more people back and engaged. So what I'm asking you is, do we go outside our little perimeter? How do we do that?
Some of the things that it's very difficult for us, to send people to other states and recruit, and some of the bigger agencies do that. One of the things that we do is we go down to some of the military bases, and when they're about to come out, we'll go to their job fairs, and we've been doing college job fairs, and we've been publicizing that stuff, so getting it out that way. I think though, where we've been real successful is word of mouth. Some of the things like Northglenn's a great place to work. What we provide our officers and everything else, and the training. The chief is awesome. Yeah, the city council's awesome.
So is there an ad that's placed? Is there a central place, like I want to be a police officer, I'm just like 50 years too old, right? So is there a place that I go that tells me who's accepting applications? Like, is it every, okay, so I know Westminster, I know Northglenn.
Yeah, there is.
There is?
There's a website.
So they don't have to go everywhere else, right? So if I was moving to Colorado and wanted to be a police officer, I can go to this website and see who's hiring and everything?
Yeah, and that's at governmentjobs.com.
My brother's a Marine, and we recently went through that because he was going to move to Colorado. And so I was.
Would he like to work with That's very interesting.
But so I saw it from that perspective for like a couple months. It was interesting. It's very user friendly.
Thank you.
Okay, so I also support your department. I think you do an amazing job, and I feel like the police officers that we have in our community are just some of our greatest assets, especially with the terrible nature of policing today. It's a lot to ask of these people to come to work every day and continue to support this community. And so one question that I have is, why is collective bargaining not on the table of considerations for maintaining our workforce? We're investing a lot in our police officers. Why are we not talking about that as a council, as a city? Just curious.
I'll take that one. It was discussed last year, and there was only 2 council members that were advancing that, and the balance of council did not want us to proceed any further with that. That's the policy decision, if you will, that was made. I would say from a management perspective, I think we provide great benefits. We move people through the STEP system pretty quickly compared to other jurisdictions. We provide great training, and so I'm not so sure that that additional layer of negotiation would add anything to the benefits that we're providing, and frankly would complicate things a little bit as opposed to just handling on an annual budget basis with the city council. Speaking from someone who came from a jurisdiction that had that, it invariably went to arbitration. Now that doesn't mean that had to happen here, but in my experience it always did, and it sometimes took away from the city budget because it became the top priority because of the contract issues.
Do we think that it might help solve some of our issues that we're seeing when it comes to retention and recruitment?
I don't, but I would defer to the chief to answer that too.
I don't, my experience, like I said, I don't have any experience in, I haven't been part of a department that had collective bargaining. I've had friends both that worked as officers,
Collective bargaining, and it seemed like it was always against us against them, rather than more. I think this one, I think if officers felt, hey, we're doing the best that we can, and working together and providing the best, being competitive, being, having a great benefit package, having some work-life balance, right? I mean, that's important as well. And I think we have, one of my big preaching points is, a family atmosphere. I love, we have an open door where it's not uncommon to see people bring in their families and kids and everything, because I think it's important for them to see them in their work life. And so that's what I'd like to do, more collaboration, more working together and coming up with that stuff, rather than, I'm just afraid that it's us against them type thing as a council and as a police chief. But I mean, I've seen Commerce City, and no offense, Jim, I don't want any part of that.
Chief, could I ask, would you consider maybe formalizing like an exit interview for some data, and then maybe even another survey again about like what are the best things about working here? What are some things that make you look at the want ads?
all right,
Maybe.
I can do that.
I'm curious, you guys talked about collective bargaining last year. Obviously, I wasn't here for that discussion, but was there any sort of survey done of the officers to see if that was something that they wanted?
Yeah, there was. And
Okay,
I think it was pretty high.
Okay, and we just said no? After that's something they said they wanted?
I didn't recommend that we institute that, and city council agreed. So yes.
But it was high and the officers wanted it?
Yeah, and I can't remember the percentage.
87%.
From a council standpoint, there were other things that we looked at within executive session that we discussed about it. Can't discuss what goes on in executive session out here on the floor, you know what I mean? So maybe we need to.
Well, let me help out just
Thank you.
too. I met with the Detective JC, who's the president of the FOP, and talked with him as well as members of the board about their concerns, and committed to them that I would meet and confer with them during every budget process. And so when the question was asked, and I don't remember the exact question on the survey, but it was, are you supportive of collective bargaining, or are you supportive of the city manager's proposal of meet and confer annually, or basically none of the above? And it was 87% wanted collective bargaining. So the fact that council didn't direct us to move forward with that, I'm still going to meet and confer with the FOP on an annual basis and have them get an understanding of where we're at with our budget and what we can and can't do. And I think, if you will, I'm walking the talk, or talking the walk, if you will, whatever the phrase is, that we maintained the step system so that within 5 years people are topped out, and we added the senior police officer position. And even when the rest of the general fund employees did not get raises in 2018, all the police officers got their steps. So we did treat them, if you will, differently than the rest of the employees.
It's just a pretty huge number. Is that something that we can come back and discuss in the study session again so that we can really take a better look at it. I mean, we're talking about officer retention and we're turning around and we're saying no to 87%. That doesn't sound like.
When you ask a question, are you supportive of or do you want? You get two different answers. We asked, are you supportive of? Means that you're supportive, but do you really want it or do you feel like you need it? And I think it was mostly like Jim said, it was pitting the council and the chief against one another. If you give people what they need and want, there's no reason to get in that adversary or set yourself up at risk to be adversarial.
I think my
concern
is are we giving them what they want if they're leaving? Are we continuing to meet the needs as years go on? And I feel like, you know, obviously we haven't done that from all of this data and everything that the chief just talked about. We're not meeting our needs of our officers, of our department. How do we fix that? How do we fix that moving forward? And how do we say in 2022, whatever happens in 2022, I mean, some other crisis is going to be here, right? How do we make sure that we're flexible and we're meeting those needs?
How do we not know, I mean, I know that you're using the numbers from the report, right? But how do we know that's why they left? We're assuming that they left because, you know, they were getting more money over here or they didn't think our benefits were right. But we're assuming that. We don't know that that's why they left. Some left through, we had retirements and things like that. So I get where you're going, but we're assuming that they left because of their benefits and their packages. And unless we had, which I don't know whether they have a formal exit interview, we really couldn't, you're not comparing, we're just assuming.
We do have, I mean, Paula does, HR director does exit interviews with everybody. So we could probably come up with, can't who said what, but we could probably come up with a consensus what was said. And I can't remember who said about the survey. I don't mind trying to put together a survey. There's probably some out there that we can use for employee satisfaction surveys. I don't have a problem doing that, or even a 360 evaluation on you know, command staff, and they feel they're being treated fairly and all of that. So
I definitely think that, I agree, we need to make sure that we're retaining our police force, but we have to figure out what is causing, you know, a fluctuation in duties. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we've been consistently understaffed in this department for as long as I've been, you know, paying attention, like 10, 15 years. And I, you know, like I said, I don't see the numbers that tell me that that is the reason, but I'd like to see it.
Add to overall, I think as a council person, the information that we were presented with, I think we had to weigh, in the end, what's best for the city also. So should we decide to do collective bargaining and then maybe the city has, I mean, right now we have a great economy. What happens when the economy tanks and the police department has something in place that they're constantly getting raises? It doesn't matter what happens. It's not dependent on what happens with the economy. So that was a big reason, I think, that a lot of us also decided not to pursue it at that time. But I definitely feel that, you know, there are steps we could take. I think the pay range could be adjusted. I think we can do some things to mitigate people leaving. But just as far as collective bargaining, I know the budget idea really weighed heavily on me, so.
I appreciate that. So what happens next with this? This is purely an update. Are we going to see something come forward to another budget allocation? Because I think before we ever vote on this or move forward, I would really love to see some sort of surveys done around what can we be doing for our officers. Because I think, as you pointed out, as Councilmember Mulligan pointed out, you know, in between 5 to 10 years, there's a major drop-off. And so I want to know what can we be doing right now to keep all of those newer officers here in Northglenn and not lose the expertise in the investment. And I mean, maybe even going back to the FOP and asking, is this something that you want versus something you would be able to pay with?
So, the purpose of tonight, I'll answer that one first, is that we had planned this on the work plan, and the timing was always planned in the first quarter, really. So coming off of your retreat, I knew public safety was going to be a topic you'd want to talk about. And so really it's foreshadowing for what not only the 2019 budget, but what future budget years might entail. So obviously we don't know how revenue projections are going to work out over the next few months, but I'm prepared to recommend at the budget time that we implement the 2019 year of this staffing plan, which would be adding 2 sworn officers, right? That's
the other thing too is with the commander. So the command, you know, that's currently in our pay structure. So what I'll be asking is, hey, can I use that saved salary, eliminate that position, hopefully getting it back in 2022, because I really need to give them some, you know, a break as well, but to get some, you know, hire, you know, an officer or promote a sergeant.
So it'd be one budgeted position we have now, but it'd be 2 new ones, hopefully to get 3 more people on the street, where they'd be an officer or a sergeant. I think the chief is definitely committed to do the survey. I guess I would leave it up to council if, you know, I need to obviously sit down with him and figure out what the timing of that would be. But, you know, once we get that done, we'd obviously share that with all of you, and if we need to have another study session, we could do that, absolutely.
So thanks for clarifying that, because I was wondering where the difference was on the 2019, that one spot you say 2 and then the next spot 3. But I seem to recall, like, over the last year, conversation was more like 5 to 7. So I'm curious if through this process, did we just decide to drop it down to 2 or 3? Because 5 to 7 was a number that had been tossed around a couple of times of officers that you need in 2019. And I just want to be sure that you're asking for what you need, for sure.
Well, like I said, these are today's numbers. So when we're doing it, I mean, these are not 75 officers is what we need today. But I understand that there's a lot of things that we want to get accomplished. I mean, you want to grow the city, you want to bring in businesses. That's going to help us down the road, and I understand that. So trying to come up with, try to get fully staffed, you know, and then if we find some extra, you know, city manager can come back and say, hey, in this process, we have 4 vacancies, but we have really 6 or 7 good applicants. Can I get an overhire of 2 or 3? You know, because during that year, we always tend to lose several. So I think that's how we can try to get those numbers, and I think that's probably the 5 or 7 that you probably heard.
I think what's really important to me is that for some of us that have been on council, we might remember a few years ago where there was a conversation that officers didn't make it to the table as far as in the budget requests, and I want to just make sure that it's not happening because you're feeling like that's what we can hire to or that's what we want, and not necessarily that there was a cutting process that happened before it got here.
So it's a balance. I'm sure the chief would love to get this, what, 81?
Yeah.
That you have listed in 2022. He would love to do that next year. I think the reality of it is that we've had such a hard time filling all the vacancies that we have budgeted. The challenge is that council would be approving a budget and committing dollars to hiring those people, and then it might cut back on something else that you want to do. That we have in the work plan that needs to get accomplished. So when the chief talks about an overhire, and that's my word, so I won't blame you for it, but essentially what it is that I want him to be continuously recruiting. Now, we only have 2 academies a year, so that's a bit of a challenge, but continuous recruitment of laterals, post-certifieds, people we're putting through the academy, and if he comes into my office and says, I'm at my budget limit, that would be the happiest day of my life. I mean, and I would say, hey, let's go to council and add whatever you need. And then we do a budget reappropriation, and we would add those positions to the budget. So I think this is achievable in terms of how we can get these positions filled. But yeah, if he maxes out in the middle of next year and we've got more qualified candidates, I'd definitely come back and try to hire them.
I think my concern again is just that sometimes we've had situations where it's come up where council then suddenly is like surprised because we didn't know this was an original requested need. So I like seeing it mapped out. I think that's important. I think that's why you did the 2018, 2020. Is because we were caught off guard and surprised because we didn't know the conversation leading up to it. So I just want to stress that it's important that we as council hear that information and get it lined up and it's not cut ahead of time. Like, if you're cutting it, then say it. That's all I'm saying, because 5 to 7 was a number we heard, and now we're at the 3.
And I appreciate the budget conversation, but new council wouldn't have known that was even a number that was out there, so.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think we had this conversation before. One of the things we've changed is when I make my budget presentation, we also include all of the package requests, whether or not I recommended they be approved or not. So you've got a list, if you will, so you can see what staff asked for and whether or not I've recommended it. So.
Thank you. Can I just one more?
Yes.
Promise. So we're budgeted for 68. We have 63, right? Is that current?
That's current.
That's current. So we're budgeted for 68, we have 63. What we need to do is find those 5 officers, and then we'll be on the roll, right? So your number of added officers of 2 is to 68 to bring it up to 70? Okay.
Well, 371 if I do the commander position, if I get approved for that.
I understand that you are doing everything that you can do, and our guys are doing everything they can do to recruit. My ask would be, how can we think outside the box? How can we recruit? I know you're doing a lot, but you know, if we're down to 90 people that are interested in the position at the get-go from the start, and I don't have an answer for you, dude, whether it's, you know, whether we need an administrative body who does some kind of recruiting, I don't know what the answer is. So maybe if we could check with other departments, you know, you may know in Colorado, but you know, maybe we can check with BFE in Wichita or something, you know, and see what they're doing out of the box. You don't like it?
No, I do.
I know.
He just made it laugh.
BFE made you laugh?
Yeah, it just made me laugh.
Okay, I'm sorry. No. No, I'm good. Go ahead.
The only last thing I was going to say is we were handed a little bit of information about the license plate carriers with a little show and tell outside. How is this going to be incorporated into 2019?
Ooh, someone's in trouble.
He wasn't supposed to give that to you yet.
It's really good info.
But he did put a lot of work into that. And actually, the city manager, myself, we're gonna, and Ian, I'll bring him in to show us that document before he hands it out to council.
Oh,
That's all right, Ian.
There's a couple different strategies we're looking at. It's going to be definitely considered as part of the 2019 budget. We're just trying to identify if it's a whole citywide purchase or if it's a reimbursement for optional, you know, if officers want it as an option, or if we just provide a certain number that we've got as a sharing. So we've got to figure that part out.
And you know, some of them will wear it, some won't. But as you can tell, how heavy those are. You know, wearing that all the time. That would be a lot.
I just, again, want to make sure that our officers feel safe when they're here, and if they choose to wear it, which is, yes, it was very heavy, you know, more power to you.
Definitely, I want to make it available to them, so that's,
Exactly.
I appreciate it.
Any other questions on staffing? Anthony?
Yes, I wanted to go to page 10, your actual sworn and budgeted sworn. The last time that they equaled was in 2009, 2010. And I don't really want to take objection with your recruiting efforts, but from then on, we're down 4 or 5 all the way through. So is it that we're not recruiting? There are not candidates out there?
So that 9 and 10, as you can see, look at the number before that. That's during that, we had to reduce our numbers. So really, when we were fully staffed, we just didn't hire people. So you look at that 69 number in 2008, and then 2009, we lost officers to that 64, and I guess we were able to maintain it in 2010. So that's, I think, what was going on during that time when we had to reduce our staffing levels down this, you know, to 64. We were fully staffed. I mean, I could be fully staffed at 58 right now if I reduce, but that's the last thing. I'm going the opposite direction.
We were on a hiring freeze.
We were on a hiring freeze and everything else during that time.
Difficult for me, so
no, you're fine.
Although I am very good at math.
That's why it was negative for me.
But the difference of allocated versus sworn, I mean, even if you were in a hiring freeze, then why even have the 67? If we were in a hiring freeze from 11 and 12, why even have a higher allocation than you need?
I think we came out of the hiring freeze and we were able to get more officers in 2011.
Yeah, you had
But
a
I think
difference
you're
of
saying-
7, a difference of 6, a difference of 7, a difference of 5, a difference of 7 between the two. And I mean, for me, and hopefully Jenny will bear me out here, but I would like to see some, I mean, you mentioned it, the number one complaint is slowing people down. And we don't have the officers to slow people down. The 22 numbers are wonderful, but that isn't doing anything for this year, next year, or the year after. Unless we fill the slots that are vacant.
Those are the traffic teams and the impact teams.
Well, with something that would impact the community. One of the main topics that came out of our retreat was safety. Not just the safety of our own community, but the people that pass through our community. You know, because they can also damage our community and our residents. So, you know, that to me is paramount, and that's what I hear so much of, you know, why can't we slow them down? You know, and I want to get one of those strips of nails, you know, that you just throw them on the street, maybe that'll slow them down.
That'll do it.
Thank you, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be rude.
No, but you know, really just to feed off that, the money that we're putting into traffic calming, you know, $300,000 on a project to do it. I mean, I'd much rather have a traffic control unit out there, and I think people would rather see police officers out there controlling traffic than, nobody wants a speed bump on every street in Northglenn, and I get afraid with all of these studies that we're doing on these different roads that it ends up being that, and in a highly residential city like this, that just doesn't work for me, and I just would much rather invest our money into having a traffic control unit than these constant speed bump issues, so anyway.
Well, we had 4 motor officers and we did impact traffic quite a bit. I mean, you know.
People were scared when they saw those motorcycle cops. And now there's
I was
fear.
afraid when I saw them because I was like, I'm not giving them an opportunity.
Kathy Bailey.
It was good. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Renee.
So where do you want me to go find recruits at? You want me just to hit the mall and see what I can do? Then I'll be arrested.
I have those stickers. I'll give them to you. You can hand them out.
As I'm appointing them as deputies?
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. All right, we're moving into our last item is the Rec Center, Senior Center, and Theater Assessment Update number 3.
So as far as the healthy meetings, didn't stretch break.
Would everybody like a 10-minute, 5-minute? How about 5 minutes?
That's fine.
Okay, 5-minute break, sorry.
Sitting for 2 hours.
Thank you.
I need to stand up.
It's fine.
These chairs don't get any more comfortable.
5 minutes. How are you? Good to see you again. I bet. After all that work, right? All right, Amanda, we'll hand it over to you.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are here tonight for what I'm anticipating to be the final study session on the Recreation Center, Senior Center, and Theater public outreach process. Over the last 6 months, we've worked with this team. At this point, we've received very favorable feedback from the public. And you'll see a little more detail of that here in a little bit once I turn things over to Dave. But nearly all of the respondents told who we interacted with, whether that be the first round of public input that we presented to you in December or this round that we just most recently completed, nearly all of those respondents were in favor of us moving forward with a facility. They certainly had different opinions about what should go in that or what type of amenities, but we heard of really positive, had really positive interactions with our attendees. The concepts plans that you'll see tonight, I just wanted to give you a quick reminder, they are just concepts. They are clearly defined. There's a lot of work that went into them. We worked with the public, we worked with the committee, but we do anticipate they're going to be further refined as we move hopefully forward in this process, and that you'll see some modification to those. The same with our benchmark study and the staffing plan and the fee schedule that go with that. They're feasible plans, they are based on real numbers, they work moving forward, but we do expect there'll be some refinement as we go, and as you make potentially decisions about how we operate those facilities. But what we're presenting to you shows that we can make this facility work with the budget we have identified, and with the staffing plan we have identified, and with a fee structure that is in line with both what our current philosophy and that of our surrounding facilities. We have our consultant team here, as well as several members of our advisory board. At least one of those individuals I think is going to come up and speak to you just briefly about the process here as we get into the presentation. We also have some members of our Parks and Recreation Advisory Board here tonight. So in a few minutes, I'm going to turn things over to Dave, and he'll go through most of the presentation. We've also got Jay and Ellie with MIG here tonight. And wanted to remind you that, or wanted to let you know that at the last committee meeting, which was the fifth workshop out of 5 4-hour workshops, they put in a ton of work. And the very last meeting, one of the things we asked them to do was to come to consensus. And every single person who was there at that last workshop was able to raise their hand on each component and say, yes, I stand behind what we as a committee are bringing forward to council. And they gave their approval for staff to present this to council tonight, and that they were willing to stand behind everything that we're bringing forward to you. Our goal here tonight is to present you with an overview of the process, a summary of the recommendations, and respond to any questions that you might have. Our intention is to bring this back on April 9th with any suggestions you may have or response to anything that you might come up with tonight. But we'd like to bring back a final plan for you on April 9th, which would coincide with the approval of a contract of the program manager that we've been working through that RFP process, which would be ready then to kick off implementation of the next phase of implementation of this project. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to Dave, and he'll run through the presentation with you. Feel free to stop us at any point if you have any questions, but we'll certainly open it up for question and answer at the end.
Great. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Dave.
Gosh, and council members, thank you so much for allowing us to make this presentation. On the outset, I'd just like to say that the process we went through, it was one of the best group of people, and the advisory committee that we worked with, they were so involved, so active, and they really spent a lot of time with us because we asked a lot of them. And they did a great job in responding. Every time we gave them a challenge, they rose up to the occasion and made the hard decisions that we felt we need to make. And so with that,
do you want to control that, or would you?
I would love to if I knew how to work it.
So that should. Oh, I used the wrong one then.
Okay.
We're gonna go. So we should be able to go up and down. Why can I not? Oh. That's the one I'm doing.
I couldn't get anything to work, so.
There we go.
They're just
I'll just-
clicking.
oh,
Did you click at the same time?
Okay, anyway, Dave Hamel with BRS. Daniel Matova's in the back there, Jay Rankins, Ellie Brophy, and Chris Weinman's here. Yeah. So that, and then Ken Ballard couldn't make it tonight when we switched the meetings and had a problem with his schedule. So we went through sort of 5 steps, and we talked a lot about that at the last council meeting that we met with you on, where we talked about the Civic Center Master Plan, the public engagement process, where we got 525 surveys back, and as we said earlier, the results of that survey was very positive. When we asked the question about, is there really a need to do this, we had 90% of those respondents say yes. So we thought that was very positive. We went through a whole market analysis with Ballard King and Associates. We looked at all of these different aspects that are up there on the board, from all the demographics of Northglenn. We looked at alternative providers. We looked at the existing market. We looked at trends both nationally, regionally, and locally to try and inform us as how this competitive market analysis went together. We established sort of a primary service area, which was sort of the confines of the city of Northglenn, and then we established this secondary service area that we felt was a reasonable distance that people would travel to come to a facility like this. We looked at what are the other service providers out there, and we've got Thornton has Mark Carpenter Center. They're building a new Trailwind Center. Paul Dirt is not very far away. Westminster City Park was very close as well. And then we looked at what are the private people doing. So we've kind of did a whole assessment and looked at a number of sort of benchmark facilities in that market analysis. We looked at Erie, Alderton, Broomfield, Wheat Ridge, Lakewood Cultural Center to try and get that theater component, and the Broomfield Auditorium. Those were sort of the targeted benchmark facilities that we looked at. We gathered, basically, basic facility information about them. We've got their revenue and expenses where they shared them. Looked at membership fees so that we could compare it to what we're going to be proposing. How many people visited. We also asked them about their facilities and what was working for them, what wasn't working. Were there things that they would do differently if they were to redo it? And so we learned a lot from that. We then, we shared with the Design Advisory Committee all of the results from that market analysis. We shared all of the public process, and we wanted to get to, a final program. And we used this tool we call the program card game, where we had these decks of cards that had information on them that talked about how much does it cost to build like a big gymnasium, a high school-sized gymnasium. It had information about how much expenses versus revenue it might generate. It described all the attributes of that kind of space. We had small gyms, medium gyms, large gyms. We had different sizes of fitness areas. All of them were choices that we had. And the committee, using this budget of about $32,400,000 for the building as a goal, they used these cards, and we split into 3 groups, and each group put together what they thought was, from hearing all of the information from the public process, what they felt we could afford. And then we tallied it all up and made sure that they tried to stay right on that budget, which this was the challenging part, because they didn't always get everything that they wanted. Some wanted a longer track, some wanted a larger gym, a bigger pool. Gee, couldn't we have, a 50-meter pool? All of those things were talked about, and we had to make some hard decisions. And maybe it'd be good, this might be a good time for Kristen to come up and maybe speak just a little bit to council about the process and what your experience was.
Where do you want me?
Right there is perfect. So we asked Kristen if we opened it up to the committee and asked if anybody would be willing to come and talk to you a little bit about their experience as one of the committee members, and Kristen boldly volunteered, so we appreciate that.
Okay, my name is Kristen Robledo. So this is very awkward. Thanks. So I wanted to be part of this committee because it's really important to me as a Northglenn resident. I've been here probably since a child. My parents live here. My grandma bought a house, still lives here in Northglenn. She bought it brand new for $18,000. I'm the second owner of my home. I've lived here for over 10 years. My husband is business manager in Northglenn. I work in Northglenn. I work with seniors in a different city. I also work with some lenders in a different city. But it's very important for our seniors to be spoken for, our theater and our cultural arts to still be represented, Northglenn to be represented, new and old. And so I really just wanted to be part of this. I really want to see us grow, but still kind of have a little bit of our home feel and give back. I wanted to give back to my community. So that was something that I worked really hard to get into the committee to do, and I did. So I was there, and it was actually really fun because they took the time to introduce it to us step by step over 6 months or 7 months. I don't know. It's been actually quite a long time. But let's see, we're introduced this budget game. That was really hard, and we did really well. My brother has played sports and went through the whole Northglenn system. He's went to a private school that still utilized the rec center, and he became a Marine. He's up at CSU on a business scholarship, but he used the rec center, and he played sports, and he still plays intramural basketball. So like basketball and having the basketball system that Northglenn Rec Center had was very important. So I just feel like I had a lot to say about all these different parts of the program, but so did everybody else. There were design aspects, and we all just had a moment where we could just stick up our hand and say, this is important to us. I want it to look like this. I want this to be there. I want this to be there. And there were so many of us, like 30 or 40 people in this program learning about what it takes. What are hard costs? What are soft costs? What are other cities doing? What do you guys have to do? How do we get this through? How do we get it approved since it's been denied so many times? What can we do? So we just kept at it, kept learning, kept engaging the community. I think I volunteered and brought my family to every single thing I could. I was like, you have to come, please come. And I put it on my Facebook. I have my own Facebook for my street, and I tell everyone about it. And it's just, that's where I'm at right now. Just getting it out there and telling you guys. So if there's anything you want to know about the real process, let me know, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you, Kristen. I felt like it was better if it came from somebody who'd actually gone through that process, and because I can tell you all about what we set up and how we did it, but feels more meaningful when you hear it from somebody who got to go through that process and be a part of the committee.
Tell you much about what we did, but it was like just learning each step and then like omitting things, adding things, and getting to this. So
it really helped you understand where the money, how much things cost, and taking it that way?
We stuck to the budget. He needs to tell you that. We really understand that, and we stuck to it because we understand it's not today's dollars. We really have to represent the future, and we all do. Like, we want that, and we understand how the city has been paying or practicing paying, or the rec center, and for the rec center, Parks and Rec has been working on that and stuff, so.
Well, you could probably talk to the chief because we held him to his budget number too. So she was being nice to you and making sure you knew that we told you to it too.
Yes, you guys have like a little bit of a hard road ahead of you, but I think that we've made a good foundation. Yeah.
Persuasive, Kristen. I think I see city council in your future somewhere down the line.
Someday. I see many people I have been like encouraged by here and voted for, so.
You're a great cheerleader.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks, Krista. So anyway, we had a great process. I think all of the committee members felt heard, and I think that was really important to make sure that everyone had a voice, and I think we were successful with that. So what came out of all of that? Well, we're going to start and talk a little bit about the site plan, and we started with the Civic Center master plan, and we used that as our starting point, and tried to stick to that plan as much as we could, and I think we did a pretty darn good job of using the space that's been allocated. And I'm going to turn it over to Jay and Ellie and have them walk you through the site plan and what we included and a little bit about how we got there.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start out. I'll let Ellie speak to the parking specifics. But as far as the overall site plan, if you remember, the location is at what we call the terminus of the Memorial Parkway, which aligns with the Veterans Memorial and the E.B. Raines Memorial in the park. And just as an example of how things do evolve a little bit through the process, one of the things that we had to sort of tackle was the CDOT I-25 widening and what that meant for our site plan, because that was in a phase of design during the master plan that we weren't quite sure what the limits of the project were going to be. And so we tried to anticipate that the best we could. But as we laid out the building and the program and thought about the circulation, fire access around the building, we ended up having to shift that footprint about 20 feet ultimately. So small revisions like that, but then obviously that has sort of small ripple effects throughout the rest of the site. But we wanted to really think about, not only the end of the day when this facility is built and, ultimately when the entire, ideally, campus is built out, but also those interim conditions, making sure that there's adequate parking, adequate circulation, that people can get here safely, that we're thinking of all different users, families with children, seniors, people with disabilities. So Ellie can speak a little bit to sort of how we're accommodating those folks and the interim condition in that building.
Sure. So on the site plan here, you'll see up on the screen is to the east towards the park. So as you come down the Memorial Parkway, there's a nice plaza and drop-off area, and that's at the main entrance to the recreation center portion of the building. Down there, we'd also have some accessible parking and bike parking as well. Then as you go south on the site, there's sort of a linear plaza with additional parking adjacent to the building. And on the south side of the building is the theater entrance and the senior center entrance. So there would be hopefully some senior center parking as well as handicap accessible parking, and then the lot on the south side of the building to serve the building.
So the lot on the south side, is that equivalent to what we currently have?
So currently, if you look at this diagram, that's the amount we have right now. It's about 160 or so. Yeah, so this 123 space lot is only part of the final parking. The way that it works, I'll just walk through the parking phasing. So do we have, let's see, the previous one?
Oh. How do you go backwards with
here?
Okay, so basically when the Memorial Parkway and the new rec center are under construction, we needed to ensure that not only the existing buildings are up and functional, but also the parking, and that you can access the buildings. So the existing parking lots won't be affected in phase one construction, and you can still access the rec center the same way you access it now.
So these guys here, so that's where the 161 number comes?
Yeah.
Right, existing parking in front of the existing recreation center.
Yep. Yep, so that will still be accessible. Basically, phase one construction, we're looking at all of this, and the parkway would be in orange. So you can still access the building, and you can still access the city hall and have the same parking. City hall parking is affected in phase one construction, but by the time construction starts, police will have vacated the current building, so that police lot, which is where you're seeing the 64, opens up for use by city hall users. We also found that City Hall has an excess of parking at the moment compared to what code requires. So we feel that there's enough parking to serve City Hall throughout all phases of construction. The new building requires about 250 spaces with the code, and that's not accounting for any overlap between the uses. So we anticipate that there will be a heavy influx of theater users, more so when there's a show in the evenings or weekends, and more rec center users maybe in the morning and the daytime. But we did not count that into our parking costs, so there should be extra. You can go to the final one. Yep. So here you'll see the final build out of the site. There's an additional, we just split that bottom lot in half, assuming half of it would serve that future residential building, and half would serve the rec center. So here we have a total of 256 spaces to serve the rec center when the site is fully built out.
And what's the number we have to have for code?
I think it's
267.
260, 250, I think it's about 250.
I've been so focused on the building that when I'm looking at this and seeing Memorial Parkway, this is part of this
It is
13
part of
million infrastructure
phase one
part.
infrastructure,
okay,
yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
And we'll talk a little more about the budget implications with infrastructure as we get a little further in the presentation, and what's included and what may have been included in master plan that looks a little different today.
So the site plan was driven a little bit by the floor plan. So I'm going to talk very quickly about the plan. I think you've all seen it, but I'm going to try and walk you through it. And one of the things we didn't talk about on the site plan, if I go backwards, the land is sloping from a high point at this corner of the site. It slopes downhill towards the detention pond. And because of that, we couldn't have a building that's just sitting on a flat platform. We had to design a building that had an entry at one end that was up on the upper level, and the entry for the recreation components is down a whole floor below. So the plan has, this is the upper floor plan, and so the big lot on the south end is up a whole, it's level with this second story. So you would come in at this level, and we'd have our senior activities. Over here we have the administrative staff offices over here. We've got a big multi-purpose community rooms down here with a catering kitchen, and it's sandwiched in between is our theater. And so then you would go down to this lower level on the next slide to access more of the recreation components. We've got this line right here. In order to build a building this size and meet the code requirements, we're going to have to build sort of, it's what's called a firewall. We're going to split the building into two pieces. And they're literally, the building could burn down on one side, but it will preserve the other half of the building. This is a 2-hour fire-rated wall. So that can withstand almost more than 2 hours of direct fire contact. But as a result of that, it was a nice dividing point between sort of the recreation components on this side and the theater and the more community activity kind of spaces on this end. So I'm going to have Chris come up here and talk a little bit about the theater component, because he's our theater expert. But the theater is all contained here and on the lower level below. But the basic components up here, you know, is the senior, we've got a senior lounge that has its own outside entrance. We have a senior multi-activity room that can be used for all kinds of things. We added a little senior outdoor patio space. Really on the very last meeting with our committee, they said, why don't we do something, we need something outdoors, a space for the seniors to go outdoors. So we added that. And then we have all the restrooms here. I think that's kind of the main things outside of the theater. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris, and you can walk them through the theater.
Jenny, did you have a question before Chris starts?
Yeah, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm looking at the locker rooms. And then seeing there's a women's locker room and a men's locker room, and it looks like there's some sort of a stairway where the family locker room is, but I don't see what happens afterwards.
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's on the lower level.
Okay.
And as we talk about upper and lower level, if you picture this building, and the upper and lower level both have an at-grade entrance, but there's still an upstairs and a downstairs, that might help orient to this proposed space.
Yeah. So now we're going to just focus on the theater.
Okay. We'll talk a little bit about the theater just as components by themselves and the key improvements that are necessary and desirable for the programs here in Northglenn, and then talk about how that relates to the rest of the buildings. So some of the key improvements that we're making programmatically that are different from what the community has today are simply greater width and a more regular shape in the stage itself to better support the range of programs that you've got. One of the things that makes Northglenn's theater programming distinctive is that you have a wide range of music, dance, theater, film, other presentations. So we need to think about a shape and format of theater that supports all of those equally well. And one of the nice things about the slope in the site that Dave was talking about, because the stage is down at the lower level and the entry is up at the upper level, means that we have a greater rake or slope in the seating. So our sight lines are going to be improved for all of those things. We're taking better advantage of the site. We get a larger lobby and a lobby all to itself for the theater, the senior, and the community room. This is a nice way to take advantage of that grouping of uses, because time of day and the fact that they all need the same kind of lobby means that we can really consolidate that activity here. And then the rest of everything that supports the theater in terms of backstage area is down at the lower level at the stage for ease of moving large objects like scenery, pianos, that sort of thing, and gives us the ability to create a very contained backstage zone, which is really important as a factor for what we heard from all of your uses, because you've got such a high percentage of programs that involve kids. And there was a very strong desire to create a secure backstage zone where everybody wasn't wandering all over the recreation center. So the nice thing about this, at the lower level, here we are at the stage level and the seating is sloping up to above, is that we have scene shop with loading dock, we have a stage door, property storage, costume shop storage, green room, dressing rooms, all surrounding the stage and underneath the seating. So everybody's at the same floor level as the stage, very good for accessibility. They are not wandering off into the rest of the rec center, very good for security, and they have their own world. And everybody's not passing through it all the time, which is really great. The key addition that we're making to the space that you don't have currently is a rehearsal room that's as large as the playing area of the stage. That's the key investment that we're making to maximize the use of the stage for performances. Because when you're using the stage to rehearse on, nobody can perform there. So our investment in intensifying the programming of the theater is to be able to put rehearsals in a dedicated rehearsal room so that you can book more performance dates inside the theater. So that's how it all works as a unit by itself, and then the way that it is a better neighbor with the rest of the rec center is we're not trying to push a theater audience through a rec center lobby. We're giving it a lobby of its own that is suitable for the community room. It's used by the seniors during the day, but then by the evening it's vacated for performances. And we will be able to utilize and think about some programmatic partnerships you could do, for instance, receptions or dinners in the community room and then take that same audience into a performance inside the theater. So these are going to be good neighbors for each other in terms of their use time of day wise, and in terms of their use of this lobby, and being separated from the recreation uses that Dave was talking about. Anything I missed, Amanda?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Are there any questions about the theater concept up here?
Just a question, yes. Same seat, same amount of seats? Do we increase the size of the theater as far as seating? What do we do?
We've aimed for the same number of seats that are in the current facility, and staff has had a lot of conversations, I think, with Chris as well as amongst one another about what makes sense for us based on the type of show that we bring in, based on the and we've had a little bit of this conversation, but be able to fill a theater to capacity on a regular basis is great for us. We don't always fill it to capacity now. We have some amazing shows that absolutely fill our theater to capacity. We have some smaller shows that fill our theater at a great participant level at 150 people. If you put that into a 500-seat theater, for instance, you feel really empty. It's really hard to perform to that. But that being said, there's a different product as well. The cost of that product, the license, the rights to put that performance on have to do with the number of seats you have. So you really want to be able to sell a show to the capacity that you have, and to have it make sense for the community and the surrounding area. We know it's a regional attraction, but we know that there's some balance there. How many people are we going to fit in those seats? Do we extend a run versus having more seats available?
So how many seats are in the theater?
Like 320 in this concept.
Just almost exactly what you have today. Amanda alluded to the fact that adding performances of lots of things is actually a more efficient way of adding capacity, because you give people choice of when to attend. The most significant difference about the seating arrangement in this theater is the fact that we've got that steeper slope and a cross aisle that breaks the seating capacity at about the 1/3, 2/3 point. It gives us a wonderful location for accessible seating for person using wheelchairs. But it also enables us to make use of that for staging reasons, to bring performers out into the house. And if you truly have something like the smaller audience that Amanda was talking about, it gives you the ability to really push the audience forward close to the stage and feel good and successful at it.
I just want to say how exciting it is to see that the infrastructure of the theater will finally match the caliber of the programming that we have there. I think this is just so cool to see. So I just want to say that.
And one of the things that wasn't mentioned, if I may add, the functionality we have in the space in terms of fly space and build space, all is maintained in the proposed new space. So our goal was to not lose any of the function that we currently have. And I think we've accomplished that here.
Yeah.
Since you're still in that space and the senior center is in that area, can you compare square footage now and what that is? Because I'm trying to wrap my mind how much bigger the new part is.
But I'm not going to try to do it off the top of my head. Unless Dave can.
I don't know that I can do it off the top of my head, but I can tell you that, we've got, right now the senior center is in the multi-purpose room. So, this is probably, the existing one is probably maybe that big, and that includes the entire senior center and the meeting space. So now we actually have a lounge, we actually have a dedicated space where they can do any kind of programming they want to. Plus, now we have the whole multi-purpose rooms available for all kinds of things that can be divided into 3 separate smaller rooms.
So those 2 spaces, the senior multi-activity and the senior lounge, are approximately the size of the current senior center without a stairwell and a kitchen in the middle. So a much more appropriate, flexible space. And as Dave just mentioned, the goal would be that those community rooms that are right across the hall would be very accessible for our senior center use during the day. So anything like a large congregate meal would happen in that multi-purpose room with the kitchen adjacent. But the concept is that those 2 specific senior areas would be more dedicated space, not space that we try to also use as dance class space and also use as meeting rooms and also use as gathering spaces on the weekends, that we'd have a much more appropriate space to have those types of activities.
So when they're doing Tai Chi, where they're doing it right now in the senior center, will they be doing it in the multi-purpose, or that's actually going to go on up in the top area?
It could be in any of those 3 spaces. So it could happen in the senior center if it's a smaller class. It could happen in a multi-purpose room because it's adjacent to the senior center, or it could happen in one of the fitness studios and part of the more active side of the recreation center. So it really broadens those options, but probably not going to be, I'm pointing at my screen like you can see that, probably not happening in that senior lounge, that area where people are greeted. Right now, if any of you have ever walked in during Tai Chi, so you walk into the front desk and you want to ask one of the staff members or one of the volunteers a question, you're whispering so that you don't interrupt, because there's a Tai Chi class or a yoga class happening in a space that doesn't have a wall or anything separating you. So it provides a more functional space for those things to happen.
Perfect, thank you.
So why don't I walk you through the recreation side of the recreation center. Again, if you park down at this end, you can come in this entry, wander over by the restrooms. There's a stairway down. There's an elevator that will take you down to that lower floor. That'll bring you out into this space here where the elevator is. You can make your way down to the main entrance, and our control point is right here, so you're pre-control. That's what this building is all about, is how do you control your visitors and your patrons coming in. So you could access the recreation center that way, or for seniors that want to come down and work out, or you can come in the main entry door where we've got a pre-controlled lobby space that has windows that look right into the leisure pool. So if your kids are having swim lessons or something, you can come and sit in the lobby where it's very comfortable and watch what's going on with your kids. Outside of control also, we have an indoor play space, sort of a McDonald's playland idea. We've got a preschool child watch area that's 2,200 square feet. Again, is pre-control, so you won't be hassling the staff if you want to come take your kids if they're going to be babysat, or if it's a preschool, it's a prepaid activity. The preschool also has an outdoor play space that's all fenced in, will meet the requirements of a preschool. That the Colorado Health Department has regulations about how big it has to be and so forth. So once you get past the control point where you will show your membership card or a punch card or pay your daily fee, that'll happen here at this control desk. You're into sort of the social lounge space, which gives you access to the gymnasium or over here to the locker rooms. And you would walk into, this is sort of the family locker room changing cabana complex here. There's also, as you mentioned, there's a stair that goes up to the second floor of the recreation side. But we've got 8 individual family changing cabanas that each have a shower, a lavatory sink, and a toilet. So you get your kids in there, you get them all changed, you come out, and you can go out to the pools. Or you have the option of going to a gender-specific locker room on either end of this bank that's more a traditional kind of locker room space that a lot of us are more used to seeing. We've also created sort of a vestibule, if you will, and control points for the leisure pool versus the lap pool. We did that very deliberately so that a lot of times we'll have a lot of early morning lap swimmers that will want to swim laps, but there's no one using the leisure pool. And so by being able to control access to the leisure pool until maybe later in the morning, we don't have to put guards on it. We only have to put guards that are going to be probably using early morning lap swimming. So by having this ability to separate the two pools, both acoustically, that's the other thing we found is if there's not an acoustical separation between the noise that's coming off of this family recreational pool to a lap pool where coaches are trying to talk to kids, tell them about how their swimming is coming along. They can't talk to them at all if it's not separated. So I think we've done a really good job of separating that. We've got our aquatic support, our lifeguards are right here where they can get into either side of the pool. They can look from the office actually into both pools. All of the pool equipment will be back here and serviced off of the fire lane that goes around the building. We've got a lot of the maintenance, storage, mechanical, electrical spaces back here that is accessed off of the service drive as well. And the gymnasium can be divided into two. We've got a high school size basketball court down the middle and youth courts going cross courts, which is probably what you're going to use the most. At least that's from my experience. We've seen that gets the most use. So let's...
Could we talk a little more about the multi-purpose spaces? One of the things I did want to share with you is one of the challenges we have today is all of our spaces are multi-use, right? So we're doing a preschool class back-to-back with a fitness class back-to-back with another preschool class, and then we're changing it over for a business meeting. And those things are happening throughout the day. This plan doesn't intend that spaces are single use, but rather tries to spread that use out across the day. So the pool, I think, is a really good example of that. One of the things we heard was we want a warmer temperature pool for aquafit class, particularly our seniors. They wanted a class that's taking place in warmer water than what we're able to offer in the lap pool. This type of plan allows us during the day, we don't have as many swimmers. Families aren't necessarily at the pool during the school year, during the school day, using the leisure pool, but it's a great opportunity to have a 10 o'clock arthritis fitness class that's taking place in that warmer water of the leisure pool. So it still allows for multi-purpose use of each of the spaces without trying to pack activities in that maybe aren't as compatible with one another.
So I'm assuming that's true for the preschool rooms, that they're like licensed preschool at certain times, but then daycare for...
Correct. So licensed preschool program, we have a current state licensed program. We would continue that state licensed program, but have a more dedicated space with childcare in at least one of those spaces during times that preschool is not offered.
When you say childcare, we're talking
drop-in
babysitting.
childcare.
Drop-in
exactly.
babysitting.
For users that are in the building.
Right. Got it.
I have two questions. One first is that we have a younger population. The median age in our city is 33, which tells me that we've got a lot of young families. And I'm not seeing any dedicated space for nursing. Is there a reason why?
Well, I'd say there's a couple of things. One, it's a concept level plan, so all of those little details don't necessarily show up at this stage of the game. Two, I think we've always embraced a culture that nursing mothers are, we want them to be comfortable, but they're welcome to nurse anywhere in our facility. The only place that, based on health department requirements, you cannot nurse in the pool, but on the pool deck while observing a child in swim lessons is very common. We want to make sure that our families feel connected and have an opportunity. If they have a little guy in the pool, they may not want to walk away into another room in order to nurse a sibling. But it doesn't mean we can't have that carved out in a new space. We do have some more private spaces that are in the existing plan, from wellness room, including like a wellness room, which could be an opportunity as well.
Well, we certainly have the family changing cabanas are.
Well, I mean, speaking as a mother who's nursed before, I don't want to nurse my child in a bathroom. But I'm thinking about nursing spaces are not just a room. I mean, it's a space where you can wash your hands, or there's a refrigerator, or there's somewhere that you can be comfortable. So I'll leave that there. And then the other thing that I'm noticing, at least on the theater side, is I'm not seeing any gender neutral bathrooms. It seems to me with the male and the female that we're trying to push people into one or the other, and so I'm wondering, is there that ability to have a gender neutral space where everybody's welcome and comfortable?
Yes, again, I would respond with very concept level. There's still a lot of room for that kind of communication with what are the exact needs of the space we need within the general areas that we've carved out.
Okay, promise this is the last thing.
No, it's
When
okay.
I'm looking at the family locker room, I assume that there are like 4 spaces on each side, and those are bathrooms as well as shower spaces. Are those the only bathrooms and showers in the area? Are we down to 8 stalls, and is that enough?
So it's 8 stalls that are the family locker rooms, and then just above that you see women's locker room. So nothing's identified in there, it's just a space that would be designed as we get further down the process. But so you have shower stalls, toilet stalls, sink fixtures in both the women's locker room, the men's locker room, and each of the 8 family cabanas. And I say family cabanas, they're also, a lot of times we have individuals who need a caregiver who may need that space, and it's a gender neutral space as well.
One question.
Yes.
So I'm trying to get a visual of like the swimming pool area, not the lap pool. Because the lap pool is going to be the same size as our current one?
Approximately.
Approximately.
Very similar.
So I have a good image of that. But for like the family section, is that similar to what you might see like in Westminster Rec Center? You know how they have the playground in there? I'm not sure if you guys would be able to speak to that, but I'm just
Again, at this point,
size.
it's a conceptual plan. We did not spend very much time talking about the actual components.
Okay.
You know, we illustrated this to show the types of things that could be accommodated within the space. So we have a zero depth entry with a interactive play feature in some fairly shallow water. We've got a room for a lazy river. We've got room for, they call it a vortex, which would be sort of a swirling pool in the middle that kids enjoy. There'd be a very sort of a shortened warm water lap warm-up area. You could also use that for aqua exercise because it'll be about 3.5 feet deep. And then we have another just general play space that again would be perfect for learn to swim programs, that kind of thing. So it's a multi-purpose space. But again, we have not really spent the next phase when we really, if it goes forward, would be when we'd have a pool consultant that we'd have on our team, and they'd come in and we'd do a whole survey about what kinds of things are desired to be in the recreation part of the aquatics area. So
I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but
Sure.
maybe just for reference, is there a space that you've designed in a facility in this area that's maybe similarly sized to this proposed space?
I think Erie, if you've been up to the Erie Recreation Center, that's a very similar one. That's just a recreational pool. Wheat Ridge isn't too far off either. They have the big black pool, and they have the leisure pool portion of it. So it's similar to that in size and space, I would say.
That helps.
Yeah.
Is the square footage that's allocated for the leisure pool, is there anything that tells us like guidelines, like for this much of a population, this is gonna be big enough? Do you know what I'm saying?
Parks and Rec standards like that are really hard to come by because we're all so different, and
Right.
communities are different, and resources are different. There's not as much of a standard that exists. We have some benchmarks, but in terms of square footage or size, I don't have a good benchmark for you that's reliable.
Do we know what, not necessarily Broomfield or Thornton because are all so much bigger, but obviously I don't know square footage in pools. But do we know if this is comparable with the cities that are our size?
I would say this is based on what we currently have. So right now we have only the lap pool that's about this size. And our strength is definitely programming because we're not a very exciting pool to come and swim in just for open swim, unless we put in the inflatable, and even then, not so much. So we don't have a lot to offer for that open swim piece. In terms of a lap pool, we know a bit what our demand is. We anticipate an increase in that demand based on a newer facility that has better amenities to go with it. We could fill that pool right now every night of the week with swim team, but we have to balance that with other needs, right? So I think based on our current needs, what our potential growth is in terms of swim team, lap swim, and the types of uses that are in a lap pool, knowing that we're essentially doubling our space with new use as well as taking some of the strain off of the existing pool, right? Because it doesn't have to be used for every aquafit class or every lap swimmer. There's going to be people who desire a warmer water environment. That we're increasing what we're able to offer by almost double. Does that answer that question?
It does.
Sort of.
But my concern is with the fact that I want to make sure that we build it big enough. You know, I don't want to be into the situation where it's not going to sustain, you know, to be able to sustain itself in the rec center.
So we used Ken Ballard as our kind of our financial guy, and he really, I think he spoke to the committee a bit when they were asking for, we need a larger pool, we need more lanes. Swim team came in and said, we need more lanes, we need a competition pool. And he really said financially it did not make sense for us to go that route.
From the operational side. I mean, I think, you know, when we were listening to the police department and they were comparing Wheat Ridge, it looked like it had a similar population. So I think this pool is very similar in size to what Wheat Ridge has, and that seems to be working out really well for them. So if that's any help in terms of feeling comfortable about it, I think that, you know, you might check with them to see if they feel like it's just overused or too crowded or what have you. It might be a good point to maybe speak with someone over there.
I can. And I would just ask you to keep in mind what we were balancing, what the committee was balancing, what we asked Dave and this team to balance was what money do we have to work with from a capital construction standpoint? What needs do we have in the community? What desires do we have in the community? And how do we operate those spaces? And Ken from Ballard and Associates or Ballard King really looked at how many people do we anticipate using this facility based on how many people are in the primary service area, how many are in the secondary service area. There's some piece of that analysis that included what our current use is, as well as what have other facilities seen, which was where he brought those benchmark facilities and all of his experience in. What type of increase can we reasonably expect based on our service area and the populations around us and our proximity to other facilities? What type of increase is reasonable to expect? He believes he's being relatively conservative in those estimates so that we don't overpromise you revenues and build a facility based on revenues that we may not be able to follow through on. So we want to be able to provide you with a space that we feel like will get well used and that we can operate.
I understand the lap pool part, but I know that we lose a lot of our people, our residents. We lose them because of we don't have the leisure pool, right?
Definitely.
I just want to make sure that we've taken everything we can into consideration that the leisure pool for the other side of our community that is not swimming laps is taken care of. You know, I don't want to short-side it, but I do understand that the lap pool is very important, but I'm the opposite way. You know, I like the lap pool, that's totally cool, but I want to be able to bring my kids here instead of my grandchildren, instead of going over to Westminster or Broomfield where we go now. So you do that then.
Any other questions before we move on or continue? All right.
Wait, one quick question. So when will we see the final plans for what this looks like?
We're not in design yet. So right now, this is as far as it will go in this stage. So all we wanted to accomplish, I shouldn't say all, the primary piece we want to accomplish in this stage is what general amenities do people want? Can we afford them? Do they fit on the space? Can we provide parking for them? And does it financially make sense for you to do both from a capital improvement standpoint and from a maintenance and operations standpoint? So we want you to have a level of confidence that says, yes, all of those things can be accomplished. And if you say go, then we will move into the design process. And that's where we take this design to a much higher level. And we get to a point where it's something you can actually build. Does that help? Okay, so no carpet has been selected, no paint has been picked. We don't know exactly what materials will be used. We know that this could work, this is feasible on this site, and we could meet what we believe the needs are of the residents, and that our users and our residents have a desire to see this go forward.
Do we have the outside, you know, like over at the rec center, how we have the outside patio section outside the pool? Where is it here?
North. Straight up.
Stroke. Thank you.
Right there.
To the east.
Thank you.
The only other thing I was going to point out on this lower level is we have 2 party rooms or multi-use classroom spaces that can be one big space or it can be divided into 2. It's right adjacent to the pool. The idea is it's a great revenue generator for birthday parties on the weekends. It can be used for coaching kids on swim team. It can be used for just multi-use classroom spaces when it's not being used for the parties and so forth. So again, moving upstairs, if you come up this stair, I go the right direction, you come up to the fitness and weights area up here. We've got 2 fitness studios, group fitness rooms, and then our wellness therapy space between them and storage. We've got a unisex toilet up on the top deck. We've got an elevator here that brings you up to a bridge across. We have spaces that we can look down on over the lobby and the front desk. We've got glass probably along this wall, so we can, from the fitness area, you can have cardio equipment lined up looking out into the pool. You can watch your kids downstairs in the pool having fun, and you can work out on the upper deck. It also gives us access to the track, which is about 14 laps per mile, 3 lanes around the inside of the gymnasium. We talked at length about why don't we bring the track around the outside, and again, that was one of those compromise things that we had to do to meet our budget, that we decided we could live with just the track on the inside. It's indoors, it's available year-round. It's a great place, particularly for seniors, to get some exercise during when the weather's not so good. So I think that's, so the other option we also have here is an outdoor fitness deck. This is facing west. I'll show you in the character images that we have the potential to do a little outdoor exercise space if we wanted to, that has a great view of the mountains. So, architectural character. We started with probably a dozen of these little thumbnail sketches of different ideas of roof shapes and forms and massing of the building. This is where we got to. And again, it looks like, oh, it's already designed, but as Amanda keeps telling us, it's just a concept. Nothing's in stone yet. It's not, nothing, but this is just an idea of what it might be like. And this is the main entrance to the Recreation Center at the very end of Memorial Parkway. It's a nicely framed view of the building from the park. It can be very nice. Again, the theater on the upper deck. The committee really liked the idea of sort of this marquee, to have it feel very theatrical, to come into the entrance for a theater performance. We also have the entrance to the Active Adult Center here. And then this is what the sort of bird's eye view from the Memorial Parkway side, looking back at this is the leisure pool area here with the outside slide. The sun deck, you were asking about where the sun deck was, it's here. The main entrance, this is all the weight and fitness area. We've got the gymnasium here, babysitting and preschool with the outside playground spaces there. Staff offices are up on the upper level here. The seniors, the theater, the fly space for the theater is all there. And we're trying to allow maybe some natural daylight into the building. We think that's really important on these big buildings. It also saves energy. And then this is a look at from the other side, from the early sketch to where it is now. This is the seating area of the theater. This is the multi-purpose rooms. You'll notice we're suggesting that part of the program and part of what the committee felt was really important was making a statement about sustainability. So we've included a certain amount of, I think we put in $250,000 towards solar collectors. Again, as a demonstration, we felt that this would be a good location that is right along I-25. It's really visible. It's really something that is going to make a statement. Again, this is our multi-purpose rooms. We put in a little outside deck that faces west. We've got some great views off to the west from here. Likewise, this is that outdoor fitness deck off of the two sort of fitness rooms that could be utilized for outdoor exercise. This is the lap pool here. And all of our deliveries into the stage will come in at this point and load directly into the stage right below the fly space there.
I want to ask a question about, have you done any work around cost so that the solar energy is more than just sending a message, that it's actually helping?
Well, obviously it helps.
Should we get more, I guess is my question.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of how much you want to spend. You know, we've looked at lots of the payback on these kinds of things, and it's not something that's going to pay for itself within 10 years. That is something that's going to be a longer payback. And so most of the communities we've been working with, you know, they want to make a statement, but it just doesn't make sense to spend that much money when, you know, if it takes 25 years to get it paid off, then you're to the point where you almost have to start replacing them again, and you never get ahead of the game by doing that. So it usually ends up being more of a demonstration.
Is that because of the size of the building, or you all have your
Well, it's the size of the building and the amount of electricity. These buildings are probably one of the most energy-consuming building types, even more so than a hospital, in terms of how much energy they use. And so it is really important for us to take the energy efficiencies very seriously. And if this moves forward, Xcel Energy has a program, they call it their EDA program, which they will work with the design team during design and do a whole energy model, computer model that they will pay for, which is really cool. They'll do all of that for us. They will hire an energy consultant to work with us to tune up the envelope, suggest mechanical systems that are more efficient than maybe you would normally do. And if you can show that you've made certain efficiencies, particularly around electricity, they will then give you a subsidy to help offset the premium cost of going to these more elaborate systems. And we've used that very successfully.
That's awesome.
Okay. One of our projects, they put in almost $60,000 to help support some of those things.
Great, thanks.
I know that this is not totally built out and it hasn't gone to design, I hear you loud and clear. But I just want to flag that I really would love to figure out how we do more on the solar piece so it's not just a statement. I think there was a bill that just was signed by the governor around being able to store solar energy in battery packs. And so I think that's something that we could potentially look at as a way to offset some of our costs.
I think it's definitely something we can and will continue to explore. I think, like Dave said, though, it's also important to look at if there's ways that for less investment we can drop the amount of power we need, our payback might be faster as well. So I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah, I'm just flagging that when I have that conversation.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that we would do, and again, as part of this EDA process, we're working on the Trailwinds Recreation Center for Thornton, and we're doing variable speed drives on all the pumps in the pool. We're using regenerative media filters, which greatly reduces the amount of water that's used and how much water is treated, how much water is heated. We're tuning the glass so that different sides of the building have different reflective qualities, so that the western side is more reflective than, say, the north side, so that we've looked at all kinds of different glass types just to tune it. We've looked at alternative insulation envelopes that we do. We looked, again, the daylighting, we can do a whole daylighting analysis to show that if we provide all these skylights, we can reduce our lighting energy bill by a tremendous amount. We're doing low flow toilets and urinals. There's some newer fixtures out now that even use less water than what you have probably seen in your homes. So there's all kinds of things that we get into in that design process to try and be more energy efficient all the time. Here's our little active adult patio space off of that multi-purpose room. I think that could be really nice, the sun deck here. And then, we made this presentation to an open house at the Recreation Center and the Senior Center recently, and we had, how many,
115 attendees.
A number of, most of them provided comment cards, and we tallied that information as well as some. So at our open house, we got 75 responses. At the rec center, we got 15, and online we had 23. And I think we got
about
more.
50 or 60 in addition to that after. We could only send them for Elliot and say, can you update again, so many times. So, but the feedback that we got after that deadline was very consistent with what we had gotten prior, so it doesn't change the percentages at all, but we did get some additional
feedback. It was
feedback.
a very similar kind of number that we saw early on in our public input process. We got 87% saying yes, that we should move this forward based on what they saw.
I would like to share with you that yes, no, maybe looks a little different than the yes, no, maybe the first round. So the yes, no, maybe the first round looked at, do you want a new facility? The comments that we heard on this round, the no's and maybes, the maybes were almost entirely, yes, but I want more. I want you, where's the hot tub? I could kind of support the plan, but I need a hot tub, or I need a sauna, or I need a racquetball court. Some of the amenities that, although there's desires for those, fell lower on the original survey and weren't as high a priority when we had those 525 responses. And again, one more of those things that the committee balanced. What can we fit in the space with the budget that we have available? So we weren't able to meet 100% of the needs of 100% of the community, but we feel like we did a good job of coming up with a balance. So most of those maybes were not in opposition of the facility, but I want a little more. The no's, the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, were focused on, they actually wanted it to be, felt like it was a little too senior oriented. I wanted to see more youth and teen specific spaces.
So then,
Antonio, do you have a question?
Yeah, on your cover letter, you listed some numbers, 116, 113, 50, for a total of 279. That's about less than 1% of our population. And I hear from my constituency probably 4 to 1. We don't need a new rec center. So, and I realize a lot of work has gone into this, and I realize that a lot of people would like to have that. But how do we get a better sampling of what the community wants?
Well,
I know you have an open door and you say, come on in and tell. But people work, 2 jobs. They don't have time to. Is there a way that we can send with our utility bill? They can go online. They can put a stamp on it. They can.
So we
make a phone
definitely
call.
accepted feedback via phone, via email, via the website, an online survey. We gave people multiple means of providing input to us. I will say we never will reach 100%. We wish everybody would come and tell us exactly what they want.
No, I realize that. But I mean, 1% is, or less than 1% is.
So we did receive.
There's also 525
that's
responses to the first survey.
I'm sorry?
Do you remember the first survey results? Then back in December, there were 525 results there. To the most recent survey, yes.
The first one had 525 responses. The second one had 115 or 113. So just as a comparison point, because it was important for me to hear. I think you had mentioned a Denver project that you were working on. and had received about 700 responses on a single
Even at
inquiry.
700%, I mean, even at 700 responses, what is that? That's not even 10%.
But I guess my point was that a Denver comparison, a much larger community, had about 700 respondents.
You know,
Just
to
as a
get a
perspective.
representative sample, if we can get 600 to 700
But that's my only input is that,
responses.
you know, I hear probably 4 to 1. That's not what we need.
Anything else before Dave continues on? All right.
The only other thing we had here was, on the comment card, we also left it open to write any comments they wanted, and there were a few comments that were common among some of them. They like the pools, they like the theater and associated spaces, want a climbing wall, like the layout of the interior spaces, want a hot tub.
Those were all mine.
So anyway, we did take some of those and tried to illustrate some of the more common ones that we heard. So operations analysis. So Ballard King put together really a whole analysis of staffing. And, you know, you were talking to the police chief about, you know, did you guys predict how much you were going to spend in utilities or exact numbers of employees? So that's what this portion of our study was doing, was trying to look very specifically at, okay, how many employees do we need? How many do we currently have? And what's the impact if we build this facility? How many new people are we going to have, and how much is it going to cost? So I'll let you talk a little bit more.
I'll talk through this a little bit. I just wanted to, again, remind you that this is a sample that we built some assumptions on. There will be refinement as we move forward, but we again wanted to make sure that this makes sense, that we feel like we can operate a facility within the subsidy that we have currently. And the conclusion that Ballard King was able to draw is, with additional staffing, you do have a full copy of the report in your attachments. I'm not going to go through it in detail unless you have questions about it. But they went through, looked at our current staffing levels, and where do we need to be in order to provide a similar level of service, but obviously a greater level of programming with more spaces. They have done an assessment of how many staff would we need to add. Most of those are frontline staff. Obviously, a pool that's the size we have currently looks very different from a staffing perspective for the pool that we're proposing. So they balanced the increase in minimum wage, the increase in staffing levels, and a proposed staffing plan. And they balanced that with looked at hours of operation, an anticipated number of attendees, and an anticipated fee structure. That anticipated fee structure is not set in stone again. I'll just keep repeating that part, but is based on, one, how we currently operate. Two, what our surrounding cities are doing and what cities who have similar amenities to us are doing. And it really, most of those fees are in kind of that 10 to 25% higher than what we have now. Yes?
Are we able to, or can we in the future partake in the Silver Sneakers program?
We currently do it, and it is well utilized. I'm not supposed to say it too out loud, but we actually get more reimbursement from Silver Sneakers than we do from a drop-in fee. So, yes. So yes, that's a very active group within the Recreation Center, and has been since we were one of the early adopters in this area. Our fees, when we get to the point of actually setting fees, it would go through the same process that you currently go through. So you currently approve the fee schedule for the upcoming year. Every single year, those fees are vetted through the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. They follow our fee policy, which looks at what are the cities around us charging. So very similar work to what was done currently, as well as what does it cost us to provide those programs, and what do we think the market can bear, what makes sense for us. So those that are in here, they were used as the benchmark to do some math. Things might look a little different based on your input and based on where we're at in 3 years when potentially the facility could be ready to open. But utilizing those numbers and a proposed set of, and this goes into a little more detail of what does it look daily versus a 20 visit pass versus an annual pass. What do those increases potentially look like for residents and non-residents? And then Ken Ballard in the attached plan really looked at what does that look like with the number of hours we have, the fees that we're proposing to charge, and the number of people we think will walk through those doors. How many people are going to come in, and how can we balance that with from a revenue side, how can we balance that with the expenses we have? So what you see on this slide is our current expense and revenue. You can see that our subsidy is about $1.4 million. When you look at the new, our expense goes up to about $4.2 million. Our revenues also go up in a corresponding fashion so that we could maintain our subsidy at $1.4 million. Obviously, we made some assumptions. We looked at a reasonable service level, what could we accomplish? Do you potentially, by the time we get around to opening, do you potentially want a higher service level? Do you want something different? That could change the number of staff that we ask you for. We had 3 or 4 positions in here that when we first started going through and doing the math and figuring out what would work, that I would love to have seen kept in here. But it didn't make sense without asking you to increase that subsidy level at this stage. So ideally, there's 3 or 4 more positions that could be in here to increase the service level that we're currently providing. Do we feel like it's what would make or break us being able to operate this facility? We don't. So we feel like it's feasible, it makes sense for us to operate a facility within the subsidy that we currently have appropriated. Yes, Jenny?
Is the month-to-month fees new?
Oh, I went back the wrong way, sorry.
Do you currently have a month-to-month fee?
We don't have a month-to-month fee. We do have the option to pay month by month. We don't charge more for it currently. We just do it as a payment plan.
Okay. So we're, okay.
And then the 66% cost recovery, is that normal for a facility like that?
So right now, our current subsidy level, it really depends on the philosophy of the community. Our current subsidy level, we're currently at about 50% cost recovery overall for the division. Our direct service provision, if we only look at the direct costs, is closer to 80 or 90%, but that doesn't include all of the administration and overhead, which is certainly a reality. So we have to include that in that number. But when we look at how we're providing service, there are certain services we want to make sure they're recovering more than 100% of their cost. There's other services we're not charging anything at all for, and they're recovering none of their costs, and maybe have some costs associated with providing those services. Other facilities really have a pretty wide range depending on their philosophy. Some facilities are recouping 100% of their costs. It's pretty unusual, and it's generally brand new facilities in communities that don't have a lot of other options or alternatives. One of the things we heard from from Ken Ballard was City of Thornton really actually kept the pricing low. He didn't push those up any further because Thornton's pricing is relatively low based on their philosophy to be able to provide service to their residents. Broomfield's was a little higher, and so he balanced those two. All right, anything else on the maintenance and operations summary? All right, project budget, I'm going to turn this back over to Dave, and I think Jay's going to chime in here. Oops.
Okay, so this slide is really just talking about what are we talking about in phase 1. And so it includes detention pond, all the infrastructure for the recreation center, infrastructure for Memorial Parkway, and also some infrastructure to feed off to the private development that's happening to either side of Memorial Parkway. Anything else?
Yeah, so I guess since I was, well, and Dave was too, but I was involved in the master plan process and we led that effort. A couple tweaks from that, which we've actually had a lot of conversations with the team from the master plan that included economic and planning systems to work on the financial sustainability analysis for you guys. As well as we reached out to some potential developers as well to kind of understand what the implications were. But largely it was, we had some infrastructure, below grade infrastructure in these portions coming off of the parkway. And there was a spray ground included in the parkway in phase 1. So in order to sort of, just like we had to do with the programming for the facility itself, working within that budget, we looked at what were the implications of not, stemming this off right now, but still stubbing out and making sure that all this infrastructure below grade is to the size and capacity that's necessary for the future development, and still allowing then phase 2 to happen, very easily. But this is, if you remember, that's a potential hotel site, city hall site. This can easily be serviced from Memorial Parkway. Similarly, the residential that was proposed to the south could be serviced there. And then this would also be plumbed and ready to go for a spray ground. And it could be something that was a GoCo grant that might be able to fund that earlier than we anticipate, but it could also be rolled into the later phases of development.
So what was the cost of the spray ground?
It's about 500,000 fully built is the estimate that we're using. Yeah. So we reduced that down to about 70,000, which just includes design and then the pipe sleeving, so they kind of get set up, so it's affordable to add later.
So here's kind of the big picture. Up above here is all the site work and infrastructure. For phase 1, infrastructure is about 6.8 million. Again, we deferred communities. That was another one. Was the community center drive traffic signal? We're going to defer that.
It's not necessary at that point based on the traffic study that was done.
Until those other
we were just trying to front load as much infrastructure
developed.
as possible in the original master plan.
Then we had about $4.4 million for landscape, demolition of the recreation center at just under $1 million, demolition of any hazardous waste. Again, we took a shot at that at $150,000. And then the building for the recreation and senior theater is about $41.8 million. That all totals up to about $54,169 versus our $54 million budget that included $1 million in grant money that we anticipate that we can get.
So as we, if I may add on to that part a little bit, so as we went through this process, we aimed at that $53 million target. As we got through and looked at the inflation factors that weren't identified within the master plan and those original numbers and how that impacted the desires and the needs, we all sat in a room and did what we could to pull things out and move, and what can we reduce, what can we change so that we still meet the intention of the master plan and meet the desires of the community as they shared it with us. And one of the things, we feel like we have some opportunity with grants on some of this, some elements within here, so I felt comfortable saying I think we can secure over the next 3 years $1 million in grant funds that would be, I think that's a reasonable target, rather than suggesting we reduce $1 million from the proposed building.
Can you get a copy of this slide because the numbers are different?
It is
at the bottom line. It hits, but
the last page in your packet, the very, very last page, matches this slide. I apologize. We changed this. We updated this one at the last minute. But the last page should match what's on the screen right now.
And I would point out that in the master plan we used 2017 dollars, which the master plan was developed, really written in December 2016, January 2017, so in essence 2016 dollars. And we clearly stated that in there, but we knew that the $53 million number is what you had all discussed, and so we really did our best to come into that at that, even with now factoring in pretty aggressive inflation, which is what we've seen over the last several years. So it's a 6% rate we
I
used,
think
correct?
it's almost, 6% for 2017, 6% for 2018, 4% for 2019, and 3% to get us to sort of the middle of 2020, which would be, we think, the approximate sort of middle of construction, which is how most of these general contractors do their estimating. They know it's not all going to be paid for and built at the very beginning of the construction, but if you shoot for sort of the midpoint of construction, that's a good target in terms of inflation. So I think we've got some pretty conservative, again, who knows what's going to happen in the next few years, but certainly what we've seen in the last couple of years in the Denver market, inflation in construction has really gone up, and it's all about labor. Most of the subcontractors are really struggling to get laborers who have some skills, and there's all this work out there in the Denver market right now, and a lot of the general contractors are struggling just to get a single bid for some of the work that they're doing. And when they get that single bid, that guy's, raised his price way up because he knows that the market is saturated and he's not going to have that much competition. So it's raising rates and the costs, not really fairly in my mind, but that's free market for you.
How have we talked about fundings?
Well, it's a combination of two things. So the infrastructure, roughly $13 million, is paid for out of the capital projects fund balance. We had about $15 million in there, 15 and a half or so, and so it would be cash funding $13 million for the infrastructure. The $40 million would be paid by the 0.5% sales tax, the 2% marijuana tax, and a $1.7 million transfer that we make annually from the general fund to the CIP fund. And that would then be able to issue debt for $40 million, and that those three funding sources would then pay the debt service over a 20 or 25-year period. And we'd be doing certificates of participation, would be our recommended funding strategy, because we're not proposing any increase in taxes, so it's not necessarily a Tabor issue as long as we do the COP approach.
So with the CIP, we're looking at going against our credit like we did the last time with the Justice Center, the same process?
Exactly. So the good thing is that we did get a credit rating with the Justice Center COPs. Before we did that COP issuance, we had no credit rating because we had no debt. And so we would not have to go through that process again other than maybe to upgrade or update the rating. The $40 million number is the number that Jason Loveland believes would still be under our capacity. You might be thinking of the water and wastewater project. So that would be paid for out of revenue bonds, which would not necessarily hit that capacity based on fees and charges of the ratepayers. Does that help?
Oh, it totally did, I know. I mean, it totally did.
Just gonna write a check for it.
Yeah, you read my mind. I mean, I understand. I hear you, and I understand.
So, steps going forward. Right now, the city's in the process of interviewing and selecting a program manager to oversee all of this if you choose to move it forward. You may choose to go through a process of selecting an architect and engineering team sometime this summer perhaps. And then really the idea is that the design phase is going to take probably about 12 months, maybe 18 months, and then construction between 16 and 24 months. I wouldn't think it would really take 24, but with the Memorial Parkway and all the infrastructure work, that's all the underground stuff that has to be done before you can even start the building, it may take a little more time than just building a building, constructing.
And the thought process, Jim, would be to bring someone in like we did with the Justice Center to, a project manager who owns it and controls it. Was that a...
Yeah, so let me reset that, if you will, a little bit. So Dave mentioned we've got a Civic Center program manager recruitment that we went through RFP process. We believe we've selected a finalist. We're actually going to be meeting again as a staff team this week to talk about that. If all goes well, we'd be bringing that contract in front of you for that program manager on April 9th. That would be anywhere from half to 1%, no, 1% to 2% of the total $53 million budget. So it would actually come off the top of this number you see tonight to be able to pay for that. Based on the proposals we've received, all of the contractors, with the exception of one, were right in that range. So we're pretty confident about that number. That would be essentially a team of people that would be an extension of staff helping us with procurements, being the owner's rep during construction, helping us with budget, schedules, presenting quarterly reports to City Council. One of the teams that we've talked about also had a public-private partnership economic development expert that would be helping us recruit private investment for whether it be the hotel or the retail or residential pieces that would be part of phase 2. The question I think you're asking is how are we going to use, what's the delivery method for the building? And so there's, design build, design bid build are pretty common things. In the Justice Center, we use construction manager at risk, or some people call it construction manager / general contractor. Our opinion is that's probably the route we would go with the rec center. The infrastructure piece might be more design build because it's a little more straightforward, but with the building itself, the CMAR process worked very well, where you get to about a 30% design documents, and then you go out and bid the construction. The contractor will come in and we'll pay them a construction services fee. I think in the case of the Justice Center, it was $40,000 or $50,000. And then we do a change order for $20 million. And we bring them in, of course, then, and they build the building. The key benefit with that, of course, is the guaranteed maximum price, which, as you've seen with the Justice Center, we've guaranteed that maximum price. We've not exceeded our contingency at this point. We've only got about 6 months left of construction. So very good delivery method. I think, unfortunately, Mr. Willett's leaving, right? He's become an expert in that. But we're hoping that our program manager consultant will be able to help us get through that process.
Yeah, you know what I do? I go home and I count dollar bills in my head.
And there's always more uses than sources, right?
That's how it works for me at home. But.
Me too.
Waiting for it.
So, with that, I'd like to open it up to any other questions that you might have of me or of the rest of the team who's here tonight that would make you feel more comfortable with moving forward on April 9th.
When we were talking about the rates or the cost of coming into the rec center, I'm curious if there's any sort of formula that takes into account our median income to determine how much we believe a family can put towards coming to the rec center.
It has not been a direct factor where it's a part of an equation. It's definitely taken into consideration. We don't have any intention of doing away with our scholarship program either, which we currently offer, which allows for up to $250 per individual in a household that meets the threshold, the same threshold as the school district uses for free and reduced lunch, which provides families with up to 50% off of programming. The Community Foundation also offers some scholarship opportunities specific to day camp to provide some opportunities for working families where that might make a significant difference, being able to have childcare continue through the summer months. And then the Arts and Humanities Foundation offers theater-specific scholarships specifically for NYT participants.
So I will not be at the meeting on the 9th, so I just wanted to share my support. I know it doesn't count towards the vote, but just wanted to express that. And then I also wanted to say that being that it's along I-25, I just hope that in the design, and was hoping some of the initial conceptual ideas would have had something rather unique to Northglenn as opposed to the same features and functions that every other rec center has. I think it's a huge, it's a disadvantage if we don't take a part of it by building a new rec center to have something that is that not every other rec center has. We talk about being a destination all the time, and I get it that there's some things, but I just really was hoping that there'd be something in the ideas that every other rec center doesn't have. And then along that timeline, have we, I mean, I'm assuming Stephen's really clear about how this is going and what impact this has for our epic events and where will our events move to. I mean, we've worked so hard to create these amazing events, and here we are, like, taking the one ground that it gets to be on.
Yeah, I communicated with him. He's safe for 2018. But we have to plan for 19, and it's gonna.
I just want to make sure he's in the loop on that.
Oh,
like,
definitely.
Absolutely, and I
he was
think,
part of the master plan process as well.
Yeah, he was absolutely, and I think if you think of the timing of things, I think just high level, you know, we get design kicked off like say Labor Day this year. We'd be looking at probably completing design through next summer into next fall of 19. And so there's a strong possibility that most of the events for 19 would also be okay because we wouldn't be breaking ground on construction.
I get that, but we've continuously grown the events substantially every year, and to kind of keep putting city dollars towards making these events bigger and bigger and bigger, and then say, oh, we've been so successful, but now we're building this, and so in 2020, we'll have to scale the events back. Like, I just want to make sure that there's rethinking that is going on proactively to make sure that the events stay successful in other locations.
I'd say keep in mind too that the ultimate build out includes things like the Festival Street and Memorial Parkway that provide some great opportunities to rethink some of our event spaces and maybe have better support spaces for them. The interim time we might have to get a little creative. And that's why we have Stephen.
I'm hoping that 2020 is the only year where it's going to be challenged, because by 21, hopefully this is major infrastructure is completed and it's back. It's reformulated at that point as opposed to.
Sure.
He's pretty excited about a new cabinet to work with. I think in his mind, he'll move some of the existing events, but I mean, since we started talking about the master plan, he's been conceiving of these new ideas that he can use this for. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why we love him.
And not to presuppose anything, but, you know, with new owners at the marketplace, we've got an opportunity for a bunch of creative things over there. Maybe there's a year off from EB Rains and we do something over there, things like that. We just got to get that figured out, but we got time, and it's definitely on the radar.
Other questions? Can I just ask two quick ones? These are quick. The $1 million grant money that you're anticipating, is that all ADCO, or are you thinking something else?
It would likely primarily be ADCO, yes. And I think the reason I think the 1 million is reasonable, we were successful with 1.7, and I think potentially we could have multiple projects within the facility that are unique enough that they would, and have enough public support that we could potentially say, without grant funding, here's what we wouldn't be putting in the building, here's how we could continue to meet what our residents and our users would like to see.
And is there any opportunity on the digital sign that we'll be putting in for advertising to maybe offset some costs, or no advertising?
So based on current policy, we haven't considered advertising because we're kind of being selfish in that we have a lot of our own programming that could definitely use that dedicated space. So we haven't considered advertising at this point. We also have to take into consideration the off-premise advertising requirements from CDOT, and that would really limit that as well.
I know District 12 had some challenges with the football stadium up the street here. They were trying to have it rebranded as First Bank Stadium, and CDOT did not allow that to occur because they didn't have a branch on site. They even volunteered to put an ATM on the property, and that was not good enough. So they're very strict on calling our marquee, if we do off-premise advertising, calling it a billboard, and then it has to meet the Roadside Advertising Act, which it wouldn't.
Okay. Just a thought. Are there any other questions? Hearing none, you want consensus from the council to move forward?
No, I think, first of all, thank you for asking that question, because that long explanation was part of my closing remarks, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I guess I would say, April 9th is an important night because we're going to be bringing this back, and your request is to actually have you adopt this formally. so that we have essentially a vote to proceed. And then as it will coincidentally, we'll hopefully be bringing the capital program manager contract that night as well, which would be another affirmation that we should be proceeding with the project.
Well, thank you all. It was really impressive. I'm so impressed. So thank you all for your work and for coming tonight and spending all these hours with us. So we will see you again. And I guess we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.